Hello everyone, good morning. It's 6 o'clock on today's show. President Zelenskyy tells Sky News he'll stand aside if Ukraine can join NATO.
We'll hear more from the Prime Minister this afternoon when he updates MPs on the diplomatic push for a lasting peace.
It's going to be a busy show this Monday. It's Monday the 3rd of March, coming your way. The UK rolls out the red carpet for President Zelenskyy, who hits back at US Republicans calling on him to go.
You talked about resignation a few days ago. How are you thinking about elections?
They'll have to negotiate with me, and I said that I'm exchanging it for NATO membership.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister announces a coalition of the willing to guarantee peace in Ukraine, plus Anora sweeps the Oscars with awards for Best Picture, Best Director and Best Actress.
The film about a stripper revealed as this year's big winner. And here at the Vanity Fair after party, we'll be catching up with some of the stars.
And in sport, FA Cup holders Manchester United are knocked out by Fulham in a penalty shootout. Good morning, everyone. Great to have you with us. Well, it's the beginning of another huge week for European diplomacy and the future of Ukraine. We'll expect to hear from the Prime Minister this afternoon when he updates MPs on his meetings. Mari will update us on that. Meanwhile, European leaders, of course, we've heard from Zelenskyy too, who rebuffed calls from senior US Republicans for him to resign, saying he would exchange his job for NATO membership. We'll discuss all of that very shortly, as I said, with Mari. But first, let's set out where we are this morning. Well, the Prime Minister hosted President Zelenskyy and 19 other world leaders and NATO's Secretary-General. This was at Lancaster House, and they agreed on a four-point plan, didn't they, to end the war and defend Ukraine against Russia, to keep military aid flowing to Ukraine and insist that Kyiv is represented at peace talks, to boost its defences in the event of a deal and build a coalition of the willing to guarantee peace.
We gathered here today because this is a once-in-a-generation moment for the security of Europe, and we all need to stay up. Getting a good outcome for Ukraine is not just a matter of right and wrong. It's vital for the security of every nation here and many others too.
Well, after the summit, President Zelenskyy flew to Sandringham for a meeting with the King, and it was, wasn't it, a symbolic and important show of support for the Ukrainian leader after angry exchanges with Donald Trump in the White House on Friday and growing calls from US Republicans for him to be replaced. Well, Yalda Hakim spoke to the president before he flew out.
Has there been any communication with the administration since the Oval Office meeting? Have they reached out to you? And separately, you talked about resignation a few days ago. How are you thinking about elections?
Yeah. Комунікації є.
There is communication, not on my level. Yes. As regards resignation, my resignation, if I am to be changed, and I'll hear, how can I put it, with what's happening with the support to change me, it will not be easy, because it is not enough to simply hold elections. You would need to prevent me from participating in the elections, and it will be a bit more difficult. So they'll have to negotiate with me, and I said that I'm exchanging it for NATO membership, and then it means that I fulfilled my mission.
Значить, я виконав свою місію.
There is NATO.
Хоча, якщо чесно,
It means I've fulfilled my mission. Although, honestly,
люди, не будемо казати їх посади, скажімо так, громадяни
it looks like the people, and I'll not be calling their posts, naming their posts, but the citizens of other countries are telling Ukrainians which president they should have, especially if these people occupy
виглядає
official posts.
неконструктивно
It seems to me a bit undemocratic and unconstructive. We are speaking about the values, and it definitely looks not very democratic. Although I'm openly saying maybe it is a solution for Putin, for everybody. If I'm not that flexible, as they say, I'm exchanging it for NATO.
Can I just ask, you alluded to citizens of other nations. I mean, since the incident, Senator Lindsey Graham said that perhaps you should consider resigning. Speaker Mike Johnson today said that maybe you should consider resigning. Is your attitude it's not their business?
дуже хороший хлопець.
Lindsey Graham is a very good guy, a very nice. And speaking who must be the president and whether I shall resign, I can give him the citizenship of Ukraine. He will become the citizen of our country, and then his voice will start to gain weight, and I will hear him as a citizen of Ukraine on the topic of who must be the president. But Lindsey represents the party that fights for democratic values, and anyway, the president of Ukraine will have to be chosen not at home, at Lindsey Graham's home, but in Ukraine.
Well, Mari's been here standing by, watching all of this. Where next, Mari?
Yeah, diplomatically speaking, this is the crunch time for Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Over the weekend, there was heavy diplomacy with Zelenskyy and other global and European leaders, as you already outlined. That four-point plan for peace, a coalition of the willing. We still don't know what that coalition of the willing is going to look like. We don't know which countries that's going to involve. And I think what will be really, really interesting over the coming days will be to see how much of that idea of a coalition of the willing that will be fleshed out and what kind of details we see emerging from different European countries. And just on today, so the Prime Minister, he is going to be giving a statement to the House of Commons later in the afternoon. Okay. And that's really after the trip to Washington at the end of last week, and then obviously that big summit over the weekend, and really just allowing a moment to address MPs on what has happened, what has taken place, what his aims and ambitions are, and what the plan is going forward. He's also actually hosting a defence event in Downing Street. So he's hosting representatives of SME, small and medium-sized businesses in the defence sector in Downing Street today, before that statement, actually, along with apprentices, students, etc. And it's a careers event to try and really show the public that supporting Ukraine is good for growth and good for jobs. And that's what they're really trying to make sure that they convince people, so they don't feel that people are being left behind, like in the way in the US, where a lot of the public in the US don't really see the point in supporting Ukraine. And just for a second on Peter Mandelson, so our new ambassador to the US, fresh in the job, was hosting the PM over in Washington last week, is really getting stuck in. Now, over the weekend, his comments emerged, which some have raised an eyebrow at, where essentially he argued in a clip that Ukraine should commit to a ceasefire first, so should do that before Russia. I think we can have a listen to the clip now, where people can just see for themselves exactly what he said.
It's clear that we need to bring the United States and Ukraine back together again. And I think the first thing that President Zelenskyy can do is to make clear his commitment to the initiative that President Trump is taking. And yes, I do think it would be a good idea if he signed the economic and commercial deal put forward by the United States.
So you see there, Peter Mandelson. What's really, really interesting is this the government position, essentially, but said a little bit more bluntly, a little bit less, perhaps gently because it's aimed at an American audience, you know, ABC News, for instance. And I think it'll be really interesting to see this morning with the Government Minister, Luke Pollard, who is the Defence Minister, as to whether this is the government's position. Because if it's not, then that's Peter Mandelson kind of freelancing over in the US, which I would be surprised at. But yeah, so we wouldn't hear those words here in the UK, I don't think.
OK, Mari, thank you. Always, your analysis is appreciated. We've got to move on, pivot over to America now, because the biggest night in film has taken place in Los Angeles, and Anora has won 5 awards at the 97th Academy Awards, including Best Film, Best Director and Best Actress. Well, let's go live now to our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer, joining us now live from Los Angeles, looking splendid. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Just tell us the big story of the night then, Anora.
Absolutely, yeah. I think people were fairly confident that it would win a few awards. I don't think anyone expected that it would walk away with 5 awards. It has done incredibly well. We're here, of course, at the sort of after party, if you like, the Vanity Fair party here in Beverly Hills. And this will be where most of the stars tend to head with their Oscar statuettes after they've finished at the Governor's Ball, which takes place after the ceremony. So we're hoping to hear from the likes of Mikey Madison and the cast of Anora. Look, it's been a night of epically long speeches, record-breaking wins, snubs, surprises, and a chewing gum incident. Take a look at what happened at the 97th Academy Awards.
Anora.
At this year's Academy Awards, the big reveal, a film about a stripper winning Best Picture. One of 5 awards for Anora, 4 for filmmaker Sean Baker, who makes history as the first person to win that many for one film in one night.
This film was made on the blood, sweat and tears of incredible indie artists, and long live independent film.
It's young star Mikey Madison beating Demi Moore to Best Actress.
This is a dream come true. I'm probably going to wake up tomorrow.
Adrian Brody's girlfriend deserving of her own prize for almost catching his gum. The Brutalist star refusing to be played off stage.
I will wrap up. Please turn the music off. I've done this before. Thank you.
Delivering a 5.5-minute speech to match his film's lengthy runtime.
I'm here once again to represent the lingering traumas and the repercussions of war and systematic oppression and of anti-Semitism and racism. I pray for a more inclusive world.
Winning for Emilia Perez, Zoe Saldana had quite the list of thanks.
To my husband, with that beautiful hair.
And more seriously,
I am a proud child of immigrant parents. My grandmother, if she were here, she would be so delighted.
Kieran Culkin reminding his wife of a promise she made a year ago about another baby.
She turned to me, I swear to God this happened, it was just over a year ago. She said, I will give you 4 when you win an Oscar. Let's get cracking on those kids. What do you say? I love you. I love you, see you soon, boo-bye. I love you.
But the night's biggest round of applause going to those who battled California's wildfires. Defying not only gravity, but some of the hardest few months in Hollywood's history. Katie Spencer, Sky News in Los Angeles.
Here at the Vanity Fair party, they're all coming through. We've already had the likes of Ralph Fiennes has gone inside, mixing with Kim Kardashian. You get sort of all sorts of people from different parts of the celebrity spectrum, if you like. Jesse Eisenberg's in there as well, as is billionaire Jeff Bezos, who didn't have to wait in line and queue. And we have had one British winner pass our way. Dune Part 2 came away with a couple of wins tonight, and one of them was for visual effects, and I managed to get hold of Paul Lambert, who won tonight, and he let me hold his Oscar. Can I be really cheeky and have a little lift of this? Whoa, this is brilliant. Oh my God, they're heavy, aren't they? So where do you keep your other one as well? And where Look, I'm just trying to have a look behind me to see if there's anyone else that you might recognise, but I suspect there's nobody that you would quite know, because I'm not managing to spot anyone at the moment. But return to us a bit later and we will try our very best to try and get you another Oscar. Look, it's been a very exciting night already. We need some Anora stars to come our way.
Oh, Katie, thank you so much. I can't believe you've held an Oscar. Claim to fame. Thank you so much. OK, let's move on to some of the day's other news as you're waking up this Monday morning. And a woman's been arrested on suspicion of arson. This is after a 4-year-old girl was killed in a house fire in Manchester. She was pulled from the blaze at a property in Rusholme yesterday afternoon, but died from her injuries in hospital. Ministers have outlined plans to abolish the leasehold system in England and Wales. People who buy their home with a lease buy the right to live there for a number of given years, but don't own the land itself. Well, the Housing Minister, this is Matthew Pennycook, says reforms would end unfair practices and unreasonable costs. And the Vatican says the Pope remains in a stable but complex condition after an isolated breathing crisis on Friday. The 88-year-old has been in hospital for more than 2 weeks as he continues treatment for double pneumonia and a respiratory crisis. Doctors say he's not suffering from a fever, but again repeated that he's not out of danger. Now, those of you commuting this morning will be finding train tickets are a bit more expensive. Rail fares rose 4.6% this weekend, affecting season tickets covering most commuter routes, some off-peak returns and even flexible tickets for travel in and around major cities. Well, let's get more on this. Our correspondent this morning is Ashna Huranag. Great to have you with us. So this is a bit of a nightmare for many people heading out on that Monday morning commute, having to splash out yet more cash.
Yeah, the reality is, Leah, that hundreds more commuters are going to have to be paying and will be paying hundreds more for their annual season tickets. And for loads of those people, it doesn't feel fair because there is this mismatch, campaigners say, and also most people, quite frankly, that you speak to who are on the trains travelling around and about the country. There is this mismatch between the price they're paying and the service that they receive. So let's break this down. What does the 4.6% increase for regulated fares actually mean? So an annual season ticket for someone that's travelling from Woking to London, that's going to go up by £187. That, by the way, the annual season ticket in itself is over £4,000. So that's quite significant rise. The next one I want to bring you is York to Leeds. That season ticket is around £133. More expensive. That is a journey, by the way, Leah, that's only some 26 minutes long, so that's quite extraordinary. For the first time since 2013, rail cards, important to say, not for disabled passengers, they're going to be more expensive. A 3-year rail card, that's going to go up to £80. It was previously, up until a few days ago, £70. All at a time where there is record low reliability. Some research done by our colleagues at the PA News Agency has found that up until the year 2, February the 1st this year, some 1 in 25 services were cancelled. We've been speaking to some of the commuters who have been out and about to get their views on this, some even resulting to other modes of transport.
It's just prices are stupid and it's ridiculous, so I just started driving.
I think we get ripped off every step of the way.
I'm taking my motorcycle test at the moment because it's just going to be a lot easier to get around the country.
So that unreliability, though, stems from operators having industrial disputes to contend with and staffing shortages. Now, the government do recognise this. They do recognise the frustration, and that's why they say this is the lowest increase we've had in 3 years. Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, says it's their #1 priority to get the railways back to a place where people can rely on them. Meanwhile, the Rail Delivery Group, who represents these operators, they say the cost of the ticket helps to fund improvements, and sometimes the reliability of these services does fall below expectations, but they're working on it.
Yeah, thank you for bringing us those numbers. People just want a train that turns up on time where they can get a seat. That's all they want. Now, let's move on then. Of course, we're talking the Oscars. Obviously, the big awards, the talk of the town, but it's also the glamour, really, isn't it? Mara's joined us for a bit of a chit-chat on this. Hollywood's biggest stars, they walked the red carpet, but should we have a look at what they were wearing?
Why not?
So first up, there is some flash photography before you show you these pictures. So just to be aware of that, of course, lots of press kind to capture these moments. Nominated for Best Supporting Actress for her role in Wicked, Ariana Grande. This is, I suppose, like a... Is it pink?
I think
it
it's pale
peach.
pink.
What pale pink dress?
I did read that 190,000 rhinestones were used to make that.
Oh, that is insane, isn't it? And the fitting for that would have taken hours and hours. Let's take a look at Cynthia Erivo. She was also honoured for her Wicked character, wasn't she, on the red carpet. This is, I think, my favourite dress of the night so far. And it's like it's deep green, it's Louis Vuitton. I could only dream of wearing a dress like this.
One day, one day.
One day. And then, of course, can you see those custom long nails that she's been famous for a while now. And never afraid to follow his own fashion direction, Timothée Chalamet.
Oh, I'm not sure about that.
Are you not? I quite like the yellow. This is a Givenchy suit. And I suppose for me, I think you've got a point, Ashna, if it was slightly more softer yellow,
yeah,
maybe I would have gone with this, but I like his bold choice.
I do. And it is the Oscars, isn't it? Biggest night of the year, you've got to do something a bit
just
special.
Go with it.
Yeah.
So he's looking
not?
happy.
I think they all... Hey, what's wrong with the yellow suit? Everyone always wears boring
I mean,
black
we're wearing
suits.
pink this morning.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
And then this is Sarah Paulson wearing a bold, that's all you can call it, really, very bold dress. This is by Marc Jacobs. How you walk the red carpet in that... I'm not sure. How do you sit down?
I think
the award ceremony is quite long.
If you have an accident, you are going to be fine. You are never going to hurt yourself in a dress like that because it's literally like an airbag, right?
True. Cushioned.
Yeah.
But I wonder how you go to the loo. Goodness me. You know, it's the practicalities we have to think about. So those are just some of the top picks on the red carpet from us here at Sky News, reflecting on the glitz, the glamour and the wardrobe malfunctions, I don't know. Shall we take a look at the weather? What's it looking like? Possibly a good week ahead for us in terms of sunshine.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, as I said, the next few days will be largely dry and settled, though spells of wet and windy weather will try to move in from the northwest. Overnight, cloud and rain will have moved south across Scotland into northern England and Northern Ireland this morning, followed by clear spells and blustery showers for the far north of Scotland. Further south, it's a cold start with a widespread frost and fog patches. It remains largely dry this Monday. That's your weather.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Well, there's still so much to talk about here on Sky News Breakfast. We've got to have a quick break. On our return, Sky News Meets Zelenskyy will bring you all the key moments from a sit-down with the Ukrainian president after a weekend of frantic diplomacy. And is the future of Gaza and the ceasefire under threat? Israel comes under criticism for stopping the flow of aid into the region.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
All alcohol products, not just wine, will have labels warning of liver disease and the link to fatal cancers.
Is it crazy? It's an industry worth around €14 billion a year. That's why Italy sees this Irish plan as such a threat.
It's always instructive and occasionally entertaining to hear what Donald Trump has to say on the issue of Brexit.
She's got her own way of doing it, that's okay.
The job takes me to every corner of this island.
The rioting stemmed from a horrific daytime stabbing attack at a primary school in the city centre.
The scale of the rioting and the destruction it caused is pretty much unprecedented here in Dublin.
Jerry, any comment on the judge's decisions? Do you feel vindicated, Jerry?
This is the end, the somewhat chaotic end, of a 52-day trial.
Micheál Martin could be set to head back to government with the Taoiseach Simon Harris.
Are you confident that you can now return as Taoiseach?
I'm cautiously optimistic and excited.
A mystery press conference hastily called. Leo Varadkar strode out and didn't disappoint.
I am resigning as President and Leader of Fine Gael effective today.
The people here sometimes feel they're somewhat neglected by the Irish government, to the extent that this place is sometimes known as the Forgotten County.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks, but none have ever been found.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Sky News, get the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, morning. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. A quick reminder of our top stories for you. A British-Israeli woman who was held hostage by Hamas for 15 months has undergone a series of operations for wounds she suffered on the day she was held captive. So this is Emily Damari, who was shot in her left hand and right leg on October 7th, causing her to lose 2 fingers and impairing her movement. Well, speaking before a series of operations in Israel, Emily said her scars represent freedom and strength. More than 2,000 people took to the streets of Jerusalem last night, demanding a deal to release all hostages still held in Gaza. Demonstrators held signs reading, "We are all hostages," and "End the war." Meanwhile, the United Nations has criticised Israel for blocking aid and supplies into Gaza after Hamas refused to accept a US proposal to extend the first phase of the deal. Mediators in Egypt and Qatar have accused Israel of violating humanitarian law by using starvation as a weapon as Gaza and its communities observe the Muslim holy month of Ramadan.
We are afraid of the war returning again. For this reason, people are afraid. They are stocking up on food supplies, and the traders are exploiting the situation by raising prices.
We're scared Netanyahu or Trump will launch a war more severe than the previous war. This is what we fear. The crossings are how people obtain the basic necessities for life. Why are they closing them?
Well, time now to take a quick look through the papers. Mari's here. We'll start, won't we, with, of course, Zelensky's visit to the UK and the Leaders' Summit. That dominates, and that's the front page, of course, of the Financial Times. It's reporting on Britain and France leading the efforts to mediate the peace in Ukraine.
The Eye highlights the PM pledging UK troops and aircraft for peacekeeping, and King Charles using soft power in talks with President Zelenskyy.
And then the Telegraph, their headline includes the Prime Minister telling European leaders we're at a crossroads in history.
On the Mail, the King's show of solidarity with Zelenskyy 48 hours after the Ukrainian president's tempestuous meeting with Donald Trump.
And of course, that is also the main story there on the Metro. The front page is reflecting what we saw across the weekend, and of course, that moment in the Oval Office too on Friday. But don't forget to join me and Mari for our news review, delving into all today's big stories for you at 6:45. We're going to head for a quick break for you. Coming up on our return, Volodymyr Zelenskyy tells Yada Hakim, "I'm exchangeable for NATO membership." We'll bring you that full interview next. Stay with us. Plus, in sport, Anthony Gordon will now miss the League Cup final against Liverpool after he was sent off in Newcastle's FA Cup defeat in Brighton.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
All alcohol products, not just wine, will have labels warning of liver disease and the link to fatal cancers.
Is it crazy? It's an industry worth around €14 billion a year. That's why Italy sees this Irish plan as such a threat.
It's always instructive and occasionally entertaining to hear what Donald Trump has to say on the issue of Brexit.
She's got her own way of doing it, that's okay.
The job takes me to every corner of this island.
The rioting stemmed from a horrific daytime stabbing attack at a primary school in the city centre.
The scale of the rioting and the destruction it caused is pretty much unprecedented here in Dublin.
Jerry, any comments on the judge's decisions? Do you feel vindicated, Jerry? This is the end, the somewhat chaotic end, of a 52-day trial.
Micheál Martin could be set to head back to government with the Taoiseach Simon Harris.
Are you confident that you can now return as Taoiseach?
I'm cautiously optimistic and excited.
A mystery press conference hastily called. Leo Varadkar strode out and didn't disappoint.
I am resigning as President and Leader of Fine Gael effective today.
The people here sometimes feel they're somewhat neglected by the Irish government, to the extent that this place is sometimes known as the Forgotten County.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks, but none have ever been found.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Sky News, get the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
OK, more on our top story this morning. It's the beginning of another huge week for European diplomacy and the future of Ukraine. We can expect to hear from the Prime Minister this afternoon when he updates MPs on his meetings with European leaders yesterday, as well as pledging £1.6 billion to buy more than 5,000 air defence missiles. Sir Keir Starmer also urged world leaders to back a peace deal. Sky's political correspondent Nick Martin reports.
European leaders presenting a united front, trying to put diplomacy back into line after a major mishap between the president of a superpower and a president at war. With Keir Starmer now the bridge builder between Europe and America.
Prime Minister, can you get peace back on track, sir? NATO allies need to step up defence spend, sir, don't they?
Shoulder to shoulder with this man, whose country they're trying to save.
President Zelenskyy, can you make it up with Donald Trump, sir?
We're gathered here today because this is a once-in-a-generation moment for the security of Europe, and we all need to stay up. Getting a good outcome for Ukraine is not just a matter of right and wrong. It's vital for the security of every nation here and many others.
The UK and France agreed to step in as President Trump steps away for now and draw up a plan for peace with Ukraine, which they will then take back to the White House.
The purpose of today's meeting was to unite our partners around this effort, to strengthen Ukraine and to support a just and enduring peace for the good of all of us. With boots on the ground and planes in the air, together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting. This effort must have strong US backing.
But Europe knows it needs to keep up the momentum. This week, European Union leaders will meet for another summit to discuss Ukraine, European security guarantees and defence spending, all designed to send a message to America that Europe is ready to step up. Nick Martin, Sky News, Westminster.
Let's get the reaction now from Kyiv and Alexander Mereshko, the chair of Ukraine's Foreign Affairs Committee and an MP with Volodymyr Zelensky's Servant of the People party. What was your thoughts, your takeaways from that summit and that show of rapport and support from Sir Keir Starmer and European leaders? Morning.
Well, first of all, it's a historic summit. It's something absolutely amazing, and it will go down in history as one of the most important events in our struggle against Russian aggression. And we're tremendously grateful personally to the British Prime Minister for being a true leader of Europe, a true leader of free world, especially after the visit, problematic, let me put it in this way, visit by our president to the United States. We needed a sort of reassurance. We needed this kind of support. And we received not only that, we received very warm welcome. And Ukrainian people are very grateful for that. So, and right now we understand that we need to get together, we need more unity, because Russian aggression is aggression not only against Ukraine, it's aggression against the whole Europe. Let's not forget that the final goal of Putin is not only to destroy Ukraine, it's only a first step. The final goal is to be hegemon of Europe, to dominate Europe. That's why our struggle, our fight is a common cause. And this summit plays extremely important role, and it gives lots of hope to Ukrainian people.
And Mr. Mereshko, what's your thoughts on his visit, on Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to the US? Have you spoken to him since Friday?
I haven't spoken to the president, but, you know, for us, for Ukrainians, it was shocking, quite honestly, because, you know, this is not what we expected. And we would expect more understanding, more empathy. And, well, I have no words to describe our feelings, but we remain proud of our president because he was speaking on behalf of the whole nation. He's the voice of Ukrainians. And after this incident, so to speak, his popularity has surged in Ukraine, and we get even more united around our president, who is a symbol of our defiance, our resistance.
Do you think all is lost here with President Trump, or do you think this moment will pass and Zelensky will head back to the Oval Office?
No, absolutely. You know, we have no right, under circumstances, in a desperate situation, you have no right to succumb to pessimism or to thinking that everything is lost. On the contrary, we should double down on our efforts to mend relations, to make more constructive relations with President Trump. Luckily, we have lots of friends in the United States among both Republicans and Democrats, and we can count what is truly important on the UK, on your Prime Minister. You have very powerful diplomacy, and we understand that a Prime Minister will become a sort of diplomatic bridge in our relations with Trump. So I'm hopeful, and I remain optimistic.
Without US support, if we look to the future, without US support, do you think Europe have enough to stand up against Russia and support Ukraine?
American support is extremely important, and I've been trying to explain to my American colleagues that it's not about money, it's about human lives. When you give air defense systems, you save each night, each day, thousands and thousands of Ukrainian lives. So any even talk about stopping military aid to Ukraine, it's extremely dangerous. But, you know, the UK gave excellent example only yesterday when Keir Starmer has declared that he's providing, your country is providing air defense missiles for the amount like 1.6 billion pounds. So this is incredible and extremely important move. Of course, you know, without American help, it would be very difficult to fight. But in the first month, in the first weeks after the full-scale invasion, we didn't have this support, and we continued to fight. Luckily now we have our European friends who will step in, who will do their best to support us as long as it takes. And I'm certain that together we can defeat Russia and we will win the war.
OK, we'll have to leave it there. Great to get your thoughts, Alexander Moresco. Thank you. Let's speak now to Callum Miller, Foreign Affairs spokesperson for the Liberal Democrats. So the UK in this for the long run. Do you back Sir Keir Starmer and the measures that he's brought in? Morning.
This summit was a really important step forward. I mean, after what we saw in the White House last Thursday, it was incredibly important for the UK to show leadership with our European partners and to reassure Ukraine that we are in it for the long haul and that we will back them in order to defeat Putin and make sure that Ukraine is in the driving seat and has the sovereignty to decide how this war comes to an end.
And then, Mr Miller, £1.6 billion in a deal to supply Ukraine with 5,000 air defence missiles, £2.2 billion loan to provide more military aid from those frozen assets, frozen Russian assets. Do you agree they've gone far enough?
Every year, Liberal Democrats have been calling for the UK to show real leadership in Europe on this question. And so we welcome the steps that have been taken, but we believe they could go further. The Russian assets that are held in the UK and across Europe are those of a criminal state that has invaded its neighbour. And we believe and have been calling on the government to make those assets available and to work with European partners so that those assets can be used by the Ukrainian state to defend itself. So whilst the announcements yesterday are very welcome, we do believe that there's further that the government could go to provide even more support to Ukraine, and we would back Keir Starmer in working rapidly with European allies in order to mobilise those resources.
And it's a unique position, isn't it, when a leader is supported from cross-party. Is this something that you agree with on this particular moment, that it should happen, that everyone should kind of back Sir Keir Starmer and what he's doing?
Duration of this terrible war, there has been very strong support across the House of Commons and indeed across the country for Ukraine. In my area, it's been amazing to see the way in which people have welcomed Ukrainians into their homes. And I believe that British people are strongly behind Ukraine and want to see it able to triumph against Russia's bullying activities. So we strongly support the government. We wish the government to go further and faster. We think a European rearmament bank is necessary so that the resources can be put in place and European allies can restore their military capability in order to provide the kinds of security guarantees the Prime Minister was talking about yesterday. So he has our full support and our encouragement in going further and faster with our European allies so that we're no longer dependent on the United States, which unfortunately over the last few months has proven itself not to be a reliable ally to Ukraine or to the United Kingdom.
So the US isn't a reliable ally, you don't think, to the UK at all?
Donald Trump's performance with J.D. Vance last Thursday was disgraceful. He deliberately set out to humiliate the president of Ukraine, and that followed from a number of remarks which were factually incorrect about Volodymyr Zelensky's position as president. Donald Trump doesn't seem to believe that Vladimir Putin is the enemy in this and has refused repeatedly to state that that is the case. And under those circumstances, European allies have no option but to come together and to reinforce our defences in order not only that we can support Ukraine, but also that our country and the rest of Europe can be safe from the threat of Russia.
And just lastly and briefly, do you think that state visit for Donald Trump should be taken away?
Stand after last Thursday why emotions are high, but it's also very clear that the state visit matters a great deal to President Trump. What we really need from the Americans is cooperation in this next period when security guarantees are critical. So I very much hope the Prime Minister will be taking forward that conversation with President Trump and pressing him very hard to provide those guarantees. If he does not do so, then I think all options should be on the table with regard to the state visit.
OK, we'll leave it there. Callum Miller, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.
OK, let's take a look at your sport.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
I needed someone to look over my plans, so I went to a man who's got plenty of experience working behind the scenes in football.
What is it you think these mentors would bring? Do you think that's going to be a difficult role? Do you think the families or the players will want to hear it?
A lot of educational people coming out of college, coming out of university are going into the system. And I have nothing against that, but that leaves a massive void of experienced ex-professional players. If you look at Sir Alex Ferguson, Ancelotti, Guardiola, Harry Redknapp, they talk about the mentors in their life. Former players will understand the difficulties that these kids will find at the back end of their time in the academy.
So playing that back, people who've had experience of what it's like when you don't make it would be able to help people through that experience. I think that makes sense. What would the mentors encourage these kids to do?
The mentor can be, that little bit of glue between the football club and the families. Parents give up a hell of a lot, Richard, to help the kid get to where he wants to get. And a lot of the times they are as...
Sky Business sponsors this report.
OK, let's take a look at the weather for you quickly.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the next few days will be largely dry and settled. Those spells of wet and windy weather will move in from the northwest. Overnight, cloud and rain will have moved south across Scotland into northern England and Northern Ireland this morning, followed by clear spells and blustery showers for the far north of Scotland. Further south, it's a cold start with widespread frost and fog patches.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you. We'll be discussing the stories making headlines in today's newspapers with Mari coming up next.
I'm Stephen Murphy and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
All alcohol products, not just wine, will have labels warning of liver disease and the link to fatal cancers.
Is it crazy? It's an industry worth around €14 billion a year. That's why Italy sees this Irish plan as such a threat.
It's always instructive and occasionally entertaining to hear what Donald Trump has to say on the issue of Brexit.
She's got her own way of doing it, that's okay.
The job takes me to every corner of this island.
The rioting stemmed from a horrific daytime stabbing attack at a primary school in the city centre.
The scale of the rioting and the destruction it caused is pretty much unprecedented here in Dublin.
Jerry, any comments on the judge's decisions? Do you feel vindicated, Jerry? This is the end, the somewhat chaotic end, of a 52-day trial.
Micheál Martin could be set to head back to government with the Taoiseach Simon Harris.
Are you confident that you can now return as Taoiseach? I'm cautiously optimistic and excited.
A mystery press conference hastily called. Leo Varadkar strode out and didn't disappoint.
I am resigning as President and Leader of Fine Gael effective today.
The people here sometimes feel they're somewhat neglected by the Irish government, to the extent that this place is sometimes known as the Forgotten County.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks, but none have ever been found.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Sky News, get the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Welcome back. Let's go through what's coming up from 7 o'clock with Wilfred Frost as the UK signs that £1.6 billion deal to supply Ukraine with 5,000 air defence missiles. We'll be speaking to Armed Forces Minister Luke Pollard. That's at 7:15. And then we'll be talking all things Oscars with film critic Anna Smith at 7:45. Who wore what and who lost out on the night. And then at 9:15, we'll be speaking to Sebastian Lai, son of pro-democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai, who's been detained in Hong Kong since 2020. That'll be a really interesting one, that. So do stay with Sky News because we are the best, essentially. In short.
Say how it is.
Exactly. Don't sugarcoat things here. We're going to go through the papers now. So what should we start with? There's that front page. All the front pages are covering Zelenskyy, the summit in London, but it was in the Express that really caught my eye, and it was this image of Prince Charles and Volodymyr Zelenskyy together, a show of unity, show of diplomacy, warmth, welcoming. And this was all after Friday and what we saw unravel at the Oval Office, which was jaw-dropping on so many levels, wasn't it? And then even before that, Keir Starmer just walking people through this backwards, I suppose, and then Keir Starmer giving President Trump that letter to the president to say, we will host another state visit because we know that Trump adores the royal family. But talking of Trump cards, well, Zelenskyy has kind of won on that front and spent an hour with the king yesterday, really. And I love this image. It was just so warm and everything that I suppose Zelenskyy needed.
Yeah, it's a nice headline as well. Keeps the home fires burning for Kyiv, with a picture there of the fireplace behind them. So yeah, it was a great image. And actually staying with that story, let's go to the Sun for a second. So there's this double-page spread in the Sun, pages 4 and 5.
Yes.
And the headline reads, Brothers in Arms. And it's a picture of President Macron, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and then also President Zelenskyy. So this little trio, essentially, and it's all about how much France and Britain are focusing on and leading this coalition of the willing when it comes to jets and troops, kind of leading the charge in Europe and globally to an extent on trying to secure that peace deal in Ukraine. And they do mention here about the fact that those two leaders really want to present this kind of great plan to President Trump once they've ironed out some of the details. And that actually, hopefully then, they can kind of present that almost, let's say, oven-ready deal. We've heard that before, to the US, trying to persuade President Trump to perhaps look past what happened at the end of last week. But, if we turn just a few pages over in the Sun to the page, there's a piece by Harry Cole, the political editor, which has a really interesting tone. Some people will be, dismayed by the tone of this piece. Other people will see it as fair criticism of Zelenskyy. But the headline reads, Zelenskyy should have done a care and made an effort to woo Trump. And what Harry Cole is arguing, perhaps controversially, is that Zelenskyy should have made more of an effort to essentially kiss the ring. And he criticises Zelenskyy for not essentially swallowing some of the unedifying moments in that meeting and kind of essentially getting on with it. He talks about how there's a growing feeling in Washington that the hero of Kyiv is running out of diplomatic road. There's a contention around whether or not President Trump said to President Zelenskyy in private that Putin is refusing to do a deal, negotiate a deal, while Zelenskyy is still the president, and therefore senior members of the Trump administration believe the chances of a peace deal would be dramatically improved if Zelenskyy were gone. But that is disputed nonetheless for now. And then also they give details about how Donald Trump was teasing Zelenskyy about not wearing a suit when they first met in Washington at that first moment. And there's a quote here from a UK government official saying he did not help himself one bit there. All he needed to do was go there, suck it up, sign the deal and say nice things about Trump, and he couldn't do it. And what's really interesting is Harry Cole says, yes, it was a bit cringe in terms of the UK's meeting with Trump, and it was an edifying, but he needs must. as Zelenskyy was warned repeatedly. And what he's arguing is that Zelenskyy was told to bite his tongue and go through a quite uncomfortable moment to get the end result, and he wasn't able to do that. Really interesting, because we've had so much outpouring of support and love for Zelenskyy. That piece there, a little bit of a different tone.
Interesting. There is certainly a playbook, isn't there, to deal with President Trump, but when you're navigating a war in your country, I suppose it's how you handle that is going to be different, isn't it, after, you know, almost 4 years coming up to. Just a quick one before people head out to work or school. This is one that picked up on my radar. It's in the Times. It's how a school in England, southeast England, is basically going to ban smartphones, which is happening across the country in different boroughs. But what this school is doing is it's urging kids to download an app. It's called the Blackout app. So it essentially does what it says on the tin. You can't see anything on the phone. So two-pronged attack really at this school, whereby kids are encouraged to give their phone at the school gate and it's locked away. But those, you know, who are kind of a little bit cheeky and manage to keep their phone on them, if they have this Blackout app, it then kind of just goes dead for those hours that you're in school. And it's a growing conversation about smartphones, the use of smartphones. I think it's Denmark that's looking into banning social media use for under 16s. Australia's already gone full force with that, and how that might be handled here in the UK. This pilot, though, has started since February half-term. It involves 2,300 pupils, and it's just designed to help them have a healthier relationship with their phones, which I think we could all do with that now and again.
Absolutely. I dread to think what my life would have been like if I'd grown up with smartphones.
Oh, completely. That's all from us for now. Wilfred Frost will be joining us after the break. See you then.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Sky News get the full story first. Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Good morning, it's 7 o'clock on today's show. 48 hours after his bust-up with Trump, President Zelenskyy tells Sky News he'll only stand aside if Ukraine can join NATO.
The Prime Minister says Europe must do the heavy lifting in a new peace plan. We'll hear more from him when he updates MPs this afternoon.
And we're live with the stars at Vanity Fair's Oscars after party.
It's a Monday, the 3rd of March. Your headlines. The UK rolls out the red carpet for President Zelenskyy, who hits back at US Republicans, calling on him to go.
You talked about resignation a few days ago. How are you thinking about elections?
They'll have to negotiate with me, and I said that I'm exchanging it for NATO membership.
The Prime Minister announces a coalition of the willing to guarantee peace in Ukraine, plus
Anora.
Anora sweeps the Oscars with awards for Best Picture, Best Director and Best Actress.
The film about a stripper was revealed as this year's big winner. And here at the Vanity Fair party, the stars and some of their Oscars are getting ready to toast their wins.
A truly extraordinary night for Anora. We're going to have all of the latest from the Oscars unfolding, as you just saw with Katie, throughout the morning here. But we start with another huge week for European diplomacy and the future of Ukraine. President Zelenskyy has rebuffed calls from senior US Republicans for him to resign, telling Sky News he would exchange his job for NATO membership. We'll discuss what it all means for Westminster, for the UK, with Mari in just a moment. But of course, yesterday, the PM hosted President Zelenskyy, 19 other world leaders and NATO's Secretary-General at Lancaster House. He's expected to update MPs this afternoon on a 4-point plan to end the war and defend Ukraine against Russia. The summit agreed to keep military aid flowing to Ukraine, to insist that Kiev is represented at peace talks, boost its defences in the event of a deal, and build a coalition of the willing to guarantee peace.
We're gathered here today because this is a once-in-a-generation moment for the security of Europe, and we all need to step up. Getting a good outcome for Ukraine is not just a matter of right and wrong. It's vital for the security of every nation here and many others too.
After the summit, President Zelenskyy flew to Sandringham for a meeting with the King. It was a symbolic and important show of solidarity with the Ukrainian leader after his bust-up, of course, with President Trump in the White House, and growing calls from US Republicans for him to be replaced. Well, Yada Hakim then spoke to President Zelenskyy just before he left the UK at about 8 or 9 p.m. yesterday evening.
Has there been any communication with the administration since the Oval Office meeting? Have they reached out to you? And separately, you talked about resignation a few days ago. How are you thinking about elections?
Yeah. Комунікації є.
There is communication, not on my level. Yes. As regards resignation, my resignation, if I am to be changed, and I'll hear, how can I put it, with what's happening with the support to change me, it will not be easy, because it is not enough to simply hold elections. You would need to prevent me from participating in the elections, and it will be a bit more difficult. So they'll have to negotiate with me, and I said that I'm exchanging it for NATO membership, and then it means that I fulfilled my mission. There is NATO. It means I've fulfilled my mission. Although honestly, it looks like the people, and I'll not be calling their posts, naming their posts, but the citizens of other countries are telling Ukrainians which president they should have, especially if these people occupy official posts. It seems to me a bit undemocratic and unconstructive. We are speaking about the values, and it definitely looks not very democratic. Although I'm openly saying maybe it is a solution for Putin, for everybody. If I'm not that flexible as they say, I'm exchanging it for NATO.
Can I just ask, you alluded to citizens of other nations. I mean, since the incident, Senator Lindsey Graham said that perhaps you should consider resigning. Speaker Mike Johnson today said that maybe you should consider resigning. Is your attitude it's not their business?
Lindsey Graham is a very good guy, a very nice. And speaking who must be the president and whether I shall resign, I can give him the citizenship of Ukraine. He will become the citizen of our country, and then his voice will start to gain weight, and I will hear him as a citizen of Ukraine on the topic of who must be the president. But Lindsey represents the party that fights for democratic values, and anyway, the president of Ukraine will have to be chosen not at home, at Lindsey Graham's home, but in Ukraine.
Amazing stuff from Yalda there last night, just before Zelenskyy left the country to go back to Ukraine. And Yalda's going to join us next hour to discuss it in a bit more detail. Mario, I have to say, I haven't had a weekend and a Sunday in particular where I've been more glued to Sky News, unfolding left, right and centre headlines on this war throughout the day. And it is convenient, by the way, on a Sunday in particular, that you can just stream it on your phone wherever you are. But there was also news from the US as well that emanated from Peter Mandelson giving an interview in the middle of the afternoon.
Yeah, what was really interesting was, as you say, we had this summit, we had Zelenskyy talking to Sky News, we had all this news, and then simultaneously across the pond in the US, Peter Mandelson, a representative over there, gave quite a newsworthy interview where essentially he called on Ukraine to commit to a ceasefire before Russia. I think we can have a listen to a clip now and you can see exactly what he said.
President Zelenskyy giving his unequivocal backing to the initiative that President Trump is taking to end the war and to bring a just and lasting peace to Ukraine. And the Europeans, George, too, they need to back the calls for a ceasefire. And by the way, I think that Ukraine should be the first to commit to a ceasefire and defy the Russians to follow.
So you can see that. What's really interesting is we haven't heard that kind of rhetoric here on UK soil, but clearly it sounds like that is the UK government's approach, but potentially for a bit more of a US audience, for instance. And I think another thing that Peter Mandelson said, which was also really quite interesting, was he urged the Ukrainians to sign that minerals deal, and he said essentially it's the only game in town. And so Peter Mandelson is talking a lot more tough, kind of reflecting the US rhetoric a little bit more, perhaps to try and bridge that gap, while Starmer is trying to be much more sympathetic to Zelenskyy and bring on the Europeans.
Well, it's going to be really interesting to put it to the government in 10 minutes' time, Luke Pollard, the Armed Forces Minister, whether that is official government policy or whether Peter Mandelson was sort of freewheeling a little bit. I mean, he's a government appointee now, so he kind of can't, but we'll see. I think also, as you're pointing out there, really interesting to see the UK still, days after, trying to make sure they don't upset Donald Trump and sort of saying some things there publicly that might appeal to his base. Let's reflect on that a little bit, the game that Starmer has played over the last week or so and the strategy he's taken. I mean, the most successful week he's ever had as Prime Minister? Is that fair to say?
I think it certainly is. I think it has been the most successful, in a depressing way, I suppose, politically speaking, week of his premiership. He has come out, he has shown global leadership, European leadership. The summit was deemed to be a roaring success, to be frank, meeting with Zelenskyy and then liaising with Donald Trump over the phone as well. He managed to juggle this kind of diplomatic difficulty incredibly well. And many people, even those who are not necessarily his usual political bedfellows, like, for instance, former Defence Secretary Ben Wallace, have come out and congratulated him on managing to find a way to really walk that tightrope very, very well. And I think while Keir Starmer's popularity was depleting, people were concerned about the economy, the NHS. When it comes to international diplomacy, he has found a way to really kind of shine globally.
I think it's hard to imagine of him having done much better in, as you said, sort of rather difficult circumstances. Imagine if the days had come in a different order. Imagine if Zelenskyy had been in the Oval Office the day before Starmer. I mean, then you're talking about an impossible job.
Yeah, the clean-up operation would have been immense.
Yeah, so a bit of luck there too. Likewise, the fact that it was sort of his turn to host, and so he was the one convening all these European leaders yesterday, which, as we said, was extraordinary to watch unfold. Mark, great stuff for now. Thanks so much. We'll talk more to Yalda, as we said, next hour about her interview last night with President Zelenskyy, and much more coverage to come. Professor Michael Clark coming up as well, former Foreign Secretary Malcolm Rifkind as well in a short while. And the government in about 5 minutes' time. Now, time to switch focus. Of course, the Oscars last night in LA. Anora has won 5 awards at the 97th Academy Awards, including Best Film, Best Director and Best Actress. Well, joining Leah and I to discuss this and all of the key takeaways from the night. Katie Spencer, wow. I mean, Anora sort of rose in the odds, I guess, a little bit as a likely winner of some awards in the last week or two, but nobody expected this, did they?
No, it was an absolutely record-breaking night in terms of Sean Baker, the filmmaker behind Anora, who actually ended up walking away with 4 awards just for himself, because he is the producer of that film, he edits it, he's the director, and he wrote it as well. So that in itself is record-breaking. And then throw in the fact that it won Best Picture as well. So Best Actress for Mikey Madison. It's been an extraordinary night in terms of them walking away with wins. I'm keeping one eye just away from the camera at the moment, just to see who's coming along. I can see a gold statuette glistening in the distance, but I can't actually recognise who it is. So I'll try and figure that out for you. But look, it's been a really, really interesting 97th Academy Awards this time around. A few snubs, a few surprises, and one chewing gum incident. Take a look.
Anora. At this year's Academy Awards, the big reveal, a film about a stripper winning Best Picture. One of 5 awards for Anora, 4 for filmmaker Sean Baker, who makes history as the first person to win that many for one film in one night.
This film was made on the blood, sweat and tears of incredible indie artists, and long live independent film.
It's young star Mikey Madison beating Demi Moore to Best Actress.
This is a dream come true. I'm probably going to wake up tomorrow.
Adrian Brody's girlfriend deserving of her own prize for almost catching his gum. The Brutalist star refusing to be played off stage.
I will wrap up. Please turn the music off. I've done this before. Thank you.
Delivering a 5.5-minute speech to match his film's lengthy runtime.
I'm here once again to represent the lingering traumas and the repercussions of war and systematic oppression and of anti-Semitism and racism. I pray for a more inclusive world.
Winning for Emilia Perez, Zoe Saldana had quite the list of thanks.
To my husband, with that beautiful hair.
And more seriously,
I am a proud child of immigrant parents. My grandmother, if she were here, she would be so delighted.
Kieran Culkin reminding his wife of a promise she made a year ago about another baby.
She turned to me, I swear to God this happened, it was just over a year ago. She said, I will give you 4 when you win an Oscar. Let's get cracking on those kids. What do you say? I love you. I love you, Zizou and Booba. I love you.
But the night's biggest round of applause going to those who battled California's wildfires. Defying not only gravity, but some of the hardest few months in Hollywood's history. Katie Spencer, Sky News in Los Angeles.
So, Katie...
Should we just take a quick look at the photographers down there? I think that's Vin Diesel. I'm not aware that he was invited to the Academy Awards, but look, he's turned up and he's giving the photographers a few handshakes and saying hello to people. I guess if you're Vin Diesel, does it matter if you went to the Oscars? You still get to come to Vanity Fair. But look, most of the big stars are already in there, we should say. Ralph Fiennes, who of course didn't win Best Actor, that went to Adrian Brody instead. Ralph Fiennes is in there hanging out with the likes of Kim Kardashian. We get sort of all sorts of types of celebrities mixing. But I can say I have managed to get my hands on one Oscar at least, and it was a British winner as well. I don't know if either of you have seen Dune Part 2. It's an epic sci-fi by Denis Villeneuve. The sandworms, the spectacle of it all, and I managed to catch up with Paul Lambert, who won for visual effects, and he let me hold his Oscar. Can I be really cheeky and have a little lift of this?
Oh my goodness.
Whoa, this is brilliant. Oh my God, they're heavy, aren't they? So where do you keep your other one as well, and where will this one go?
So, Katie, 2 questions. How heavy is an Oscar, really? And also, how do you get a ticket to an after-party?
Well, OK, the weight of an Oscar, I would say maybe a sort of slightly not too heavy bowling ball. It is heavy. It's heavy, but not massive. But yeah, heavy enough that my weak muscles that don't go to the gym felt the weight of it. How do you get an invite? If you don't win an Oscar, actually, I mean, your Oscar, when you pull up outside, is your ticket to get into this party. So unless you have unless Vanity Fair have asked you to come here, you don't get through the door unless you've got one of those gold statuettes. But actually, you will find a lot of the nominees, even if they don't win, are invited to come here, and they do have commitments to come here anyway if they've signed up to agreements with designer labels. So we're seeing the likes of, I would imagine, Demi Moore here in a different dress to the one that we saw in earlier in the evening, because I would suspect she is one of those celebrities that has signed a designer deal, so has to be here whether or not she wants to sort of go home and cry over the fact that she didn't win tonight. But she looked stunning. So who's the real winner here?
OK. Katie, thanks so much. I was going to say she should have a coffee, but perhaps it's champagne now.
Well, I think she should have a bit of both, because she's got to keep coming back, later on in the morning. But yeah, get a bit of party spirit. Don't tell anybody, and just,
carry on.
Make it roll.
Listen, I want to talk about another big story for the programme today. While everyone's heading out to travel to work, the trains, there's going to be a big hike in how much it costs to use our trains in this country. Our correspondent Ashna Hurinag is live at London Waterloo Station this morning. So what are the numbers, Ashna?
Well, the fares are rising, but for some commuters it doesn't feel very fair because the price they're about to pay doesn't match up to the service that some say is being provided. But as you say, Leah, let's break down that 4.6% increase for many people watching. So if you're a commuter going from Woking to London, that's a season ticket that already costs some £4,000. That's going to go up by £187. The next one I want to bring you is York to Leeds. The season ticket there, that's going to be more expensive by £133. Bear in mind, of course, that's a journey that's only some half an hour long. And for the first time since 2013, rail cards, it's important to say, not the one for disabled passengers, they're going to be more expensive. A 3-year rail card was £70, it's now going to be £80. All at a time that we are seeing record low reliability. Research that's been done by the Press Association news agency has found that in the year up to the February the 1st, 1 in 25 services were cancelled in England. The unreliability due to industrial disputes, staff shortages, and it's important to say the rail delivery group, people that run and in charge of the operators, they say they're doing all they can to improve the service.
OK, Ashna Hurinag, live from London Waterloo. Thank you so much. Elsewhere, a woman's been arrested on suspicion of arson after a 4-year-old girl was killed in a house fire in Manchester. She was pulled from the blaze at a property in Roshholme yesterday afternoon, but died from her injuries in hospital. Ministers have outlined plans to abolish the leasehold system in England and Wales. People who buy their home with a lease buy the right to live there for a given number of years but don't own the land itself. Well, Housing Minister Matthew Pennycook says reforms would end unfair practices and unreasonable costs. And the Vatican says the Pope slept well overnight after an isolated breathing crisis. This was on Friday. The 88-year-old has been in hospital for more than 2 weeks and remains in a stable but complex condition. Doctors say he's not suffering from a fever, but again repeated, he's not out of danger.
Leah, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. Time to pivot back to the top story of the day and discuss it with the government. We're joined now by Luke Pollard, the Armed Forces Minister. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us, Minister.
Good morning.
Talk to me about where you stand this morning as to whether the United Kingdom, it's not so much can trust the President of the United States, but can rely on him at a time of need.
Well, the US is our most important, significant and closest security ally. We cooperate with them deeply on defence, intelligence and security matters every single day. What we have at the moment, I think, is a position where both the US President, the Prime Minister and President Macron all agree that we need to move towards a plan that delivers a durable and lasting peace in Ukraine. The only way that can happen is for European nations to step up our support for Ukraine and to create a situation where we can have a security guarantees for Ukraine backed by the United States that will prevent Russia from ever invading again. Because the very real worry that I think the Ukrainians have, that President Zelenskyy explained at the weekend, is any short pause in the war simply allows the Russians time to rearm, regroup and re-invade. Now, that is not acceptable. That doesn't deliver the lasting peace that we need. And that's why we need to work closely with our European and our US allies. And that's precisely why you saw the Prime Minister have such important, deep diplomatic conversations over the past week with all of them.
It's interesting to hear you strike that tone. I'm kind of getting a sense of pragmatism. It feels like that was one of the key tones that came out of an extraordinary week for international affairs from the Prime Minister's approach to it last week, was trying to be pragmatic. With that in mind, do you think that the relationship between President Zelenskyy and President Trump can be repaired? Or in the interests of being pragmatic, in the interests of getting where everyone wants to get to, should he consider stepping aside in order to allow a pragmatic deal to be struck between the US and Ukraine?
I mean, the events last week in the Oval Office were uncomfortable, and no one wants to see that. But we also know that the only way to create that lasting peace is with US involvement, with the continuing military support to our friends in Ukraine, because we're talking a lot about what the peace looks like, but we shouldn't forget that the war is continuing today. You know, there are Russian glide bombs landing on the front line, killing people. There are Russian cruise missiles and drone attacks on Ukrainian critical national infrastructure happening today. So as well as making sure that we can bring our allies together to create a plan for a durable, lasting peace, Europe and the US are essential in delivering that. We've got to step up our military support to keep Ukraine in the fight tonight. And that's really important. That's the reason why over the weekend the government announced a £1.6 billion missile contract, with missiles being made in Northern Ireland, creating 200 jobs there, more in the supply chain, that will provide Ukraine with the ability to shoot down those Russian cruise missiles attacking their infrastructure. We've got to keep Ukraine in the fight, provide a plan for a lasting peace, and then a plan for the security guarantees, which the Prime Minister has said could include and will include UK forces on the ground, in the air, in the sea, around Ukraine, to make sure that we can create that lasting peace in Ukraine. But that requires US and European nations to be involved as well.
Do you think the US will back that whilst President Zelenskyy remains in power?
Well, it's clear that the meeting last week was very uncomfortable, but it's for the Ukrainians to choose who their leaders are. President Zelenskyy is a democratically elected leader. He's been clear that he sees his role as bringing lasting peace to Ukraine, and he's been clear over the weekend as well that he's prepared to take steps himself with his position if it helps secure a lasting peace for Ukraine. But it's for the Ukrainians to decide on what terms that peace is conducted, what, how and to what extent that plan works. But we need to do our bit. And that's why over the weekend and all throughout last week, you've seen incredible leadership from the United Kingdom, from the Prime Minister in particular, having these really difficult conversations with our allies. And sometimes when you're speaking to your friends, the conversations that are tougher are even harder. But we're having those deep diplomatic conversations to understand how we can give more military support today, how we can create that lasting peace tomorrow.
I just wanted to pick up, though, on that point. You made that clear. The Ukrainian people get to choose their leader. In an interview just before he took off last night, Yalda Hakim for Sky News was asking President Zelenskyy about that. And he made clear again, his price for stepping aside would be NATO membership. Again, I come back to this term, pragmatism. Is that realistically off the table for Ukraine at this stage?
Well, the United Kingdom believes that Ukraine is on an irreversible path to NATO membership. It's clearly not going to join the alliance tomorrow, but we believe that their rightful place is within the NATO alliance. But to get there, we have to create this peace. And I think it's worth just stressing that this is really difficult and hard, but this is why these conversations are taking place, why the Prime Minister convened European leaders and the Prime Minister of Canada in London at the weekend, why he welcomed President Zelenskyy last week, why he travelled to the US last week to try and get agreement on what a plan looks like. That's what UK leadership, along with our French friends, are delivering at the moment. But we should be in no doubt that there'll be lots of twists and turns and opportunities for people to speculate about what a deal would look like. It's not my job to be able to offer speculation on what the terms of any agreement should be or what any security guarantees look like, because if I do that, the only person that would benefit would be your viewer in the Kremlin, President Putin, and we don't want to give him any advantage in any negotiations to understand what the security guarantees look like. But I can tell you that we're working closely with our European and US friends to create a plan that would be lasting, because I don't want a short pause that allows Ukraine to be reinvaded in a month or a few months' time by Russia again. We need a lasting peace. To do that, more military equipment now, a clear plan for a negotiated settlement, and a lasting peace backed by European and US security guarantees.
Minister, I just wanted to read you something that Peter Mandelson said yesterday, your ambassador to the US. Europeans, too, need to back the calls for a ceasefire. And by the way, I think that Ukraine should be the first to commit to a ceasefire and defy the Russians to follow. That is UK government policy now?
No, it's certainly right that the Ukrainians want peace. I think of all the people on our continent that want peace, the Ukrainians want it the most. But we're still in discussions, diplomatic engagement with our European, US and Ukrainian friends as to the shape of that deal. But it's certainly right that the war could stop tomorrow if President Putin stopped his illegal and unprovoked aggression. He could stop this war. So what we need to find is a formula that allows a peace that is lasting and durable to be created and then to be defended, because we need to defend this peace. Just as NATO has defended peace in Europe since the Second World War, we will need to find a way of defending that peace in Ukraine as well.
So Peter Mandelson misspoke yesterday?
That's not government policy, and you wouldn't expect me to commentate on every ups and down in the negotiations. But we are seeking to find that lasting peace. But it's certainly true that the Ukrainians want peace in their country.
Let's just quickly touch one final point. The Prime Minister said that Europe must do the heavy lifting. President Macron yesterday spoke about getting to 3 to 3.5% of GDP for defence spending. A crazy week last week. You pledged to get to 2.5 by 2027. Do you think you now have to discuss bringing forward when you reach 3% as well? Is that something to be discussed in the next 6 months?
Well, the decision to increase defence spending to 2.5% by April 2027 will provide the Ministry of Defence with £13 billion extra in 2 years' time to provide on defence. We have a commitment to 3% in the next Parliament, but it's just as important we look at what we are spending that money on, because frankly, we've inherited an armed forces that's been hollowed out and underfunded. We've got a retention and recruitment crisis we've inherited from the last administration. So we have to take steps to spend that money wisely, to renew the contract between the nation and those men and women who serve in our armed forces. We've taken steps to do so with the biggest pay rise in 20 years for our armed forces. And when the strategic Defence Review, which is a document that will set out what the shape and structure of our forces will be, is published in the spring, you'll see how we intend to spend that money and spend it more wisely. But it's certainly true that European nations need to do more to step up their own military spending, but also need to step up their military support to Ukraine. The UK is doing that, and many of our European nations are doing, European friends are doing so, but there is more to do for all of us.
Luke Pollard, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, it's nearly half past the hour. Let's have a look at the weather.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the next few days will be largely dry and settled, though spells of wet and windy weather will try to move in from the northwest overnight. Cloud and rain will have moved south across Scotland into northern England and Northern Ireland this morning, followed by clear spells and blustery showers for the far north of Scotland. Further south, it's a cold start with a widespread frost and fog patches. That's your weather.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Still to come here on the breakfast show this morning, as the Prime Minister pledges a coalition of the willing to help Ukraine. We'll get reaction from the former Foreign Secretary, Sir Malcolm Rifkin. We'll also go back to the red carpet at the Vanity Fair's after party with all of the action from last night's Oscars.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's Senior Ireland Correspondent.
It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century.
I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirm that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister.
My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight.
We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Lough Neagh. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record.
Sky News, the full story first.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Sky News get the full story first. Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Well, coming up, we'll assess Ukraine's future security. Michael Clark is here to discuss that with us, and we'll be joined in just a moment by the former Foreign Secretary, Sir Malcolm Rifkind to discuss that. Also, but first, a reminder of all of the day's top stories. Leah's got that for us.
Oh, thank you so much, Wilfred. The Prime Minister is expected to update MPs this afternoon on talks with European leaders to defend Ukraine against Russia and secure lasting peace. Responding to calls from US Republicans for him to resign, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy told Sky News that he would only go if Ukraine was allowed to join NATO.
They'll have to negotiate with me, and I said that I'm exchanging it for NATO membership.
And all the Oscar buzz now. Anora was the big winner at this year's ceremony, scooping 5 Academy Awards in total. It's all about a sex worker who has the chance of a Cinderella story when she marries a Russian oligarch. Meanwhile, Adrian Brody was named Best Actor for his role in The Brutalist.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. Well, Sir Keir Starmer has suggested a coalition of European allies could step up and defend a potential deal for Ukraine to protect any peace deal that is agreed. Well, in a moment, we'll be discussing all of the technical details of what will be required for that peace with our defence and security analyst, Professor Michael Clark. Michael, great to see you. But we also want to speak, first of all, to the former Foreign Secretary, Sir Malcolm Rifkind, who joins me now as well. Good morning to you, Sir Malcolm. Thanks so much for joining us. My first big question is, do you think it is possible for President Zelenskyy and President Trump to get back on good terms enough to get to a deal that is lasting?
Yes, I think it's not only possible, I think it's extremely likely for this reason. Of course, what happened on Friday was a disaster for President Zelenskyy. It was also potentially a disaster for President Trump, because at the end of the day, he cannot negotiate a ceasefire or a deal with Mr. Putin without the support of Ukraine. He can't enforce that ceasefire because if Ukraine chooses to keep fighting, there is no ceasefire and Trump's whole strategy collapses. So I think it's good news for both if they get together again.
Well, just expand on that for me a little bit, because why does Donald Trump have to do anything on here? I mean, the political support he has from his own side is striking to see.
Well, yes, but this doesn't depend on domestic political support in the United States. And what he has seen is he's got very little support from outside the United States for the way he has behaved recently. But I think there is, a lot of some good news which is now appearing, because it's been pretty bad news for the last few days. The overwhelming good news is now that the United Kingdom and France and the European countries as a whole are now directly, not indirectly, directly involved in the future of this negotiating process. You'll recall that a couple of weeks ago, the White House implied that there was no involvement at all of Europe. This was purely between Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin. They would have informed Zelenskyy. They would consult him officially. There was no role for the European countries. Well, we're Ukraine's neighbours. We're directly involved in whatever happens there. And what has happened over the weekend is that Keir Starmer, President Macron, and the European countries as a whole are now, with Zelenskyy, putting a plan together. According to what Keir Starmer has said, I'm sure it's true, he and Macron have already had talks with Trump, who appears willing to see what they come up with. And that is Europe involved in a very, very big way. And that's how it should be. And it never should have been contemplated otherwise.
Do you think, given all of what you're saying and the way Europe is going to seemingly step up to the plate, in 5 years' time, we'll look back on this and be glad that it all happened, even if it didn't sort of happen by intention and with warmth?
Allow me to say I wouldn't even dare predict what will happen in 5 weeks' time, so I'm not going to predict 5 years. I think that's perhaps a bit overambitious.
But I mean, in the way in which we're boosting our defence spending, and so is France, seemingly so is Germany, and we're working together again, and we're being prepared to do things on our own if necessary. I mean, is that a good outcome for the UK?
It's a hugely desirable outcome for this reason. Yes, we've announced the figures, and there's going to be real increases in defence expenditure in Britain and France, and I'm sure in Germany with the new Chancellor Merz, and in other countries. Now, that takes time to show its impact. But remember, the concern that we've had is not that Putin was going to attack the Baltic states or Europe in the next 6 months or 12 months. The concern has been if there is a ceasefire, if he appears to have gained territory by this war, will he be tempted to expand his aggression, particularly to the Baltic states and other countries? Now, that was never going to be in less than 2 or 3 years' time. By that time, the sort of decisions that have been announced in the last few days across Europe, they will have come into impact. The size of our armed forces will be significantly greater. And of course, it's not going to end at a particular percentage of 2 point this or 2 point that, or even 3 point. I think we're going to have to see a major expansion of responsibility for our own defense. This is about our own self-defense in Britain and France, elsewhere in Europe, that we cannot assume that the United States will be there to help. And they have other problems in China. So, this is not in itself an irrational development that is taking place.
So, Malcolm, I'm not sure if you saw what Peter Mandelson said to George Stephanopoulos on ABC yesterday afternoon. He said the Europeans need to back calls for a ceasefire. And by the way, I think that Ukraine should be the first to commit to a ceasefire and defy the Russians to follow. I just put that to the government minister, Luke Pollard, the Armed Forces Minister, and he said that was not government policy. What do you think happened yesterday? Do you think it was just a moment where the ambassador misspoke, or do you think he did get pseudo permission to say it?
I think the ambassador was a bit over-enthusiastic, and I think he had temporarily forgotten that he now represented government policy, and his own personal views were very important and very interesting, but perhaps need to be left for another day.
Clearly, there's a bit of game playing as well from all members of the government to try and keep a pragmatic working relationship with the US. Do you think the UK, either in the short term or the long term, can rely still on the US if something significant happened?
Yeah, I think the circumstances of the last few days have been remarkable because it was the juxtaposition of Keir Starmer's extremely successful meeting with President Trump. Clearly, they do get on with each other, and Trump sees the United Kingdom as key to the United States' own foreign policy, because the fundamental question is, if Britain's not the closest ally of the United States, who is? And nobody yet has volunteered another country as being closer to the US. But in addition to that, we had the fortunate coincidence that Keir Starmer was going to be chairing the meeting in London yesterday of all the European ministers. So he has now emerged as the main spokesman on behalf of Europe. And it really emphasizes that despite the ongoing controversies about Brexit, this has got nothing to do with Brexit. On matters of defense and national security, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and all the other European countries are in complete coordination with each other. And that is how it should be, and all how it has been over the years that have gone behind us.
So, Malcolm, great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, let's discuss all of this with Professor Michael Clarke, who's with me this morning. Michael, good morning again. Good to see you. So just break down for us how significant the US involvement in any sort of peacekeeping forces is. We go through boosts in defence spending, more European countries being willing to step up to the plate. Is that all pretty meaningless unless the US is backing it too?
Well, that's what the Europeans are saying, particularly the British and the French are saying, that whatever we do, and we want to help where we can, it will only make sense if somehow the United States is backstopping it. And we use this saying, guaranteeing it, backstopping it, standing behind us. Nobody quite knows what that means yet. And President Trump has been sort of round in a little circle. Because when he was with Keir Starmer last week, in 2 sentences, he said, no, we wouldn't. Oh, yes, we would. We'd always back the British. But then, no, we wouldn't. So he's musing. He doesn't have a policy on it. He just muses out loud to the press. But what this agreement at Lancaster House is trying to do is not say, look, we're waiting for the US to decide and then we'll decide. We're saying, let's be proactive. We've got a plan. We think this plan is consistent with the way US policy may evolve. If it isn't consistent with US policy, if the US walks away from the whole thing, then this plan will still be important to help the Ukrainians carry on in some way. So the plan is trying to do 2 things at once, I think.
What does all of this sort of signify to the Russians? I mean, it seems like we're clearly towards a path where at least European forces will be used in some kind of peacekeeping deal. Is that tantamount to everything he's against? Or if the US isn't quite involved,
It's a challenge to the Russians, for sure, because Putin has always said, and Lavrov backed this up last week, he said, we will not have European forces in Ukraine under any guise, certainly not as NATO forces, but not as independent forces, British independent forces, French independent forces, just working with Ukraine. We won't have it, because Ukraine is not part of Europe, it's part of Russia. Historically, they say, it's not true, but historically it's part of Russia, so we won't have it. But they may have to settle for it, because if the United States does end up with some sort of truce, then somebody is going to have to back it up in some sort of way. And what the Europeans are saying is, well, Putin will come round to that. Trump has said, oh, yes, Putin's agreed to it. And then 24 hours later, Lavrov said, no, Putin hasn't agreed to it, and we won't stand for it. So we are heading for a clash over that issue of principle. We'll see how much the Russians really stand by it.
In terms of, it's clear we're not going to get a ceasefire in days or even weeks. How much longer can Ukraine keep going as they are, particularly in light of clearly a bit of animosity between the US and... Could the US just cut supply?
Very good question. They've got... the Ukrainians have got quite a lot of the supplies that Joe Biden, before he left office, made sure were going through, and the pipeline is still active.
But have they already arrived? Could Trump stop
A lot of them have arrived, and some of them haven't. So, yes, in theory, some of them could be cut off. And I've asked this question around a few of the bazaars. How long could the Ukrainians keep going? And the answer is quite a few months with American supplies, and they'll get some European supplies. What they can't substitute for is the sheer amount of ammunition they get from America. So the Americans can supply lots of rockets, lots of 155mm artillery shells, lots of anti-aircraft missiles. And that's what the Europeans can't supply because we don't have them, and we're only just now ramping up production of those things. And that's where they would miss it. But if the Ukrainians say, look, we can't do a suicide deal, I've got this phrase, they might be offered a suicide truce. It's a truce, but it's suicide for Ukraine. They may say, look, we've got no choice but to carry on fighting. How long could they keep going for? Probably quite a lot of the rest of this year. However, what would be the strategic purpose? They'd still probably lose territory, they'd still lose people, and if the end result is the same, why would they do it? But sometimes, when countries are in desperate straits, they simply hang on to sheer hope that they can't go along with suicide, so they'll keep on fighting in the hope that things will change.
One quick question as well, for me, more broadly, over the last couple of weeks. If the US doesn't support European allies in any meaningful way, who is more powerful militarily today, Russia or Europe, if we get our act together just with the current levels of spending?
Oh, if Europe mobilised what it's got, it's immensely stronger than Russia. It's 12 times richer. It's got 3 times more aircraft. It's got twice as many ships, more than twice as many ships. It's got about 1.5 times the ground forces. Russia's strong in ground forces, at least numerically. The Europeans are weaker in ground forces, but even so, we've got 150% of what they've got. So if you do it as a paper exercise, say you're at Staff College and you do a paper exercise, what have they got, what have we got? If we mobilised it all, we're immensely stronger than they are. But they mobilise everything, we mobilise nearly nothing.
Professor, as always, a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Now, still to come here on The Breakfast Show. After a short break, we'll dive back into all of the headlines coming out of the Oscars overnight.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
All alcohol products, not just wine, will have labels warning of liver disease and the link to fatal cancers.
Is it crazy? It's an industry worth around €14 billion a year. That's why Italy sees this Irish plan as such a threat.
It's always instructive and occasionally entertaining to hear what Donald Trump has to say on the issue of Brexit.
She's got her own way of doing it, that's okay.
The job takes me to every corner of this island.
The rioting stemmed from a horrific daytime stabbing attack at a primary school in the city centre.
The scale of the rioting and the destruction it caused is pretty much unprecedented here in Dublin.
Jerry, any comment on the judge's decisions? Do you feel vindicated, Jerry? This is the end, the somewhat chaotic end, of a 52-day trial.
Micheál Martin could be set to head back to government with the Taoiseach Simon Harris.
Are you confident that you can now return as Taoiseach?
I'm cautiously optimistic and excited.
A mystery press conference hastily called. Leo Varadkar strode out and didn't disappoint.
I am resigning as President and leader of Fine Gael effective today.
The people here sometimes feel they're somewhat neglected by the Irish government, to the extent that this place is sometimes known as the Forgotten County.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks, but none have ever been found.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Sky News, get the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back, everyone. Well, Anora won big at this year's Academy Awards, taking home Best Film, Best Director and Best Actress too. Let's talk of all the other winners on the night too, shall we? And we'll bring in Anna Smith, film critic and former chair of the London Film Critics Circle, and she joins us now on set. Great to see you.
Good to be here.
Did you stay up all night then?
I got up early and I watched it on catch-up, so I've seen it, but yeah, that was my way of doing it.
I think we undersold Anora there, didn't we? A little bit. It won 5.
It won 5, and editing as well. Yeah, so it did really well. It was
4 went to one individual.
It's exactly, and that's the first time that any one person has won 4 for the same film. So Sean Baker is a bit of a one-man band, although of course it's a collaborative effort. But yeah, well done him. He's a great filmmaker. He's been sort of slogging away on the indie scene for many years, making really individual films, and this kind of glory, I think, is much deserved for him.
Anyone you felt didn't quite get the limelight that they should have got?
Well, a lot of people thought that Demi Moore would win for The Substance for Best Actress. Now, this went to Mikey Madison for Anora, but it felt like it could be her comeback moment, like we saw with kind of Jamie Lee Curtis, recently with Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I think it was a bit of a shock. I think most people watching sort of gasped a bit, pundits, because we thought that Demi was going to get that.
Just dwell on the Anora success, though, for us, because I guess Mikey Madison, people started to wonder she might win Best Actress, but I don't think it was expected to win Best Film, Best Director and Screenplay and Editing and all of the rest of it. I mean, it kind of came out of nowhere as the big surprise of the night, and clearly the winner of the night.
It's been a really interesting awards season this year because the favourites have changed frequently, and over the past few weeks, Anora's been sort of catching up, winning a lot more of the Critics' Awards, the Indie Awards, and suddenly it became more of a serious contender than anyone thought. But it did win the Palme d'Or in Cannes, and that's often a sign, as we saw with Parasite, for example, that it might be in line for an Oscar. And I think personally it's a sign that the Oscars are going in a slightly more edgy direction. I mean, there's comedy elements, there's thriller elements in this. It's a real blend of genres.
What I thought was really interesting was Best Supporting Actor, and that was Kieran Culkin. And he did this amazing speech, didn't he, where he said with his wife, if he went on to win an Oscar, they would have 2 more babies. I mean, it just goes in to show the type of character he is. But, well-deserved, I thought, there, from Succession on Sky Atlantic to basically winning an Oscar.
He steals the show in A Real Pain. I mean, it's a tremendous film. It's sort of darkly funny, very moving. He has poignant moments, he has dramatic moments, he's very funny. But as we see this award season, you never know what he's going to say when he takes to the podium to win something, and this was no exception.
Where did the Brits rank last night? I guess Conclave didn't do as well as it might have done.
Yes, Conclave got 1, and I think we did quite well for The Brutalist, so we had a few winners there of cinematography and score. But it wasn't a big night for the Brits, no.
Amelia Perez, then, obviously, in the lead-up, whether it was the BAFTAs or the Golden Globes, it didn't quite sweep up what we might expect. What did you think about
Well, it was leading the way with the nominations. Then, of course, there was some controversy involved with its star colour, Sofia Gascon. But Zoe Saldana was consistently winning a lot of awards for Best Supporting, and she took to the stage for a very tearful, as always, acceptance speech. She really has given this film her all. I've interviewed her for my podcast, Girls on Film, and she really is so passionate about this project. And she was tearing up when I was speaking to her. You know, she really feels very strongly about the representation involved in this.
In terms of those acceptance speeches, we also saw a very powerful and impassioned speech from the Brutalists' Adrian Brody, who got Best Actor. I mean, he actually kind of pushed back on the Oscars sort of music, trying to tell him to wrap up as well.
Yes, he's a real figure of this award season. You know, of course, this is his second Best Actor Oscar, and yeah, he wasn't going anywhere. He really wanted to have his moment, but he is extraordinary. And The Brutalist is an incredible film, 3.5 hours long, but I didn't think it was too long. And often, you know, as we film critics, we often complain that films are too long, but this one was worth every moment.
Well, I thought the critics usually like the length, don't you?
Oh, I don't know. If you sit in the screening room, sometimes we're going, is it 90 minutes? Yes.
OK, there we go.
We love our jobs then.
Just lastly, what do you make of the fact that, you know, it was 1929 when the Oscars started. It was done at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. It's behind closed doors. And now we're quite used to seeing, you know, the big glitzy ceremony. It's come such a long way, hasn't it?
It is a really big deal now, and I think the sort of TV viewing numbers are up now. I think a few years ago they were sort of worried that it wasn't relevant to young people, but now we're seeing a lot more people engage with it, and it is, it's a big show.
Anna Smith, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining us. Fantastic dissecting of the breaking news overnight. Anna Smith discussing the Oscars there. Now time for a quick look at the weather.
The perfect climate, wherever the destination. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The next few days will be largely dry and settled, though spells of wet and windy weather will try to move in from the northwest. Overnight cloud and rain will have moved south across Scotland into northern England and Northern Ireland this morning, followed by clear spells and blustery showers for the far north of Scotland. Further south, it's a cold start with a widespread frost and fog patches. It remains largely dry on Monday with freezing fog lifting and clearing to sunny spells. Thicker cloud will bring patchy light rain to parts of western Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England and much of Ireland. It remains windy in northern Scotland with blustery showers. It should feel pleasantly spring-like where we have the sunshine and light winds. That's your weather.
The perfect climate, whatever the forecast. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Do stay with us here on Sky News. We'll be back with all of the day's top stories, of course, Oscars, but also the latest on Ukraine. We'll also be joined by Yalda after her interview last night with President Zelenskyy just before he left the UK.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
A very good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock on today's show. 48 hours after his bust-up with President Trump, President Zelenskyy tells Sky News he'll only stand aside if Ukraine can join NATO.
A rebuff to the UK's man in Washington, Peter Mandelson. The government tells this programme that his call for Ukraine to declare a ceasefire first is not policy.
Plus, we're live with the stars at Vanity Fair's Oscars after party.
It's Monday, the 3rd of March. Your headlines. The UK rolls out the red carpet for President Zelenskyy, who hits back at US Republicans calling on him to go.
You talked about resignation a few days ago. How are you thinking about elections?
They'll have to negotiate with me, and I said that I'm exchanging it for NATO membership.
The Prime Minister announces a coalition of the willing to guarantee peace in Ukraine. Plus,
after the diplomatic drama of the past few days, Ukraine's president returns home, where Russia's war is still raging.
Anora.
Anora sweeps the Oscars with awards for Best Picture, Best Director and Best Actress in a total of 5.
The film about a stripper was revealed as this year's big winner, and here at the Vanity Fair after party, the champagne's flowing as the stars celebrate their wins.
Very good morning to you. It's the beginning of another huge week for European diplomacy and the future of Ukraine. President Zelensky's rebuffed calls from senior US Republicans for him to resign, telling Sky News he would exchange his job for NATO membership. And the government has rebuffed suggestions from US Ambassador Peter Mandelson that Ukraine should be the first to declare a ceasefire. We'll discuss all of that in just a moment with our political correspondent Mario Rohr and our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes. First, though, let's recap an extraordinary day of diplomacy yesterday. Well, the Prime Minister hosted President Zelenskyy, 19 other world leaders and NATO's Secretary-General at Lancaster House yesterday. He is expected to update MPs this afternoon on a 4-point plan to end the war and defend Ukraine against Russia. The summit agreed to keep military aid flowing to Ukraine, to insist that Kiev is represented at peace talks, to boost its defences in the event of a deal, and to build a coalition of the willing to guarantee peace.
We're gathered here today because this is a once-in-a-generation moment for the security of Europe, and we all need to stay up. Getting a good outcome for Ukraine is not just a matter of right and wrong. It's vital for the security of every nation here and many others too.
Well, after the summit, President Zelenskyy flew to Sandringham to meet with the king. It was symbolic and important, though, to show solidarity with the Ukrainian leader after his bust-up, of course, with President Trump in the White House, and growing calls from various US Republicans for him to be replaced. Just before he then flew out back to Ukraine, the President, Zelenskyy, sat down with our Yalda Hakim.
Has there been any communication with the administration since the Oval Office meeting? Have they reached out to you? And separately, you talked about resignation a few days ago. How are you thinking about elections?
There is communication. Not on my level. Yes. As regards resignation, my resignation, if I am to be changed, and I'll hear, how can I put it, with what's happening with the support to change me, it will not be easy, because it is not enough to simply hold elections. I said that I'm exchanging it for NATO membership. And then it means that I fulfilled my mission. There is NATO. It means I've fulfilled my mission. Although, honestly, it looks like the people, and I'll not be calling their posts, naming their posts, but the citizens of other countries are telling Ukrainians which president they should have, especially if these people occupy official posts, it seems to me a bit undemocratic and unconstructive.
Joining us now live from Kiev is our Defence and Security Editor, Deborah Haynes. Deborah, what a rollercoaster couple of days for President Zelensky. Do we end the weekend with a glimmer of hope that he can recover his relationship with the US president, or is that lip service now, and is the belief there in Kiev that that particular relationship is broken?
Well, nothing's really changed, has it? Let's face it, we haven't heard from Donald Trump since about specifically all of this European fanfare to do with security supporting Ukraine, peace plans. Nothing really works unless Donald Trump says yes. If Donald Trump does not back what Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron are proposing, then the European peace plan looks pretty feeble, given that the European militaries rely so heavily on America's far more powerful armed forces. It is just a reality of the fact that Europe chose to disinvest in its military capabilities since the end of the Cold War and has always been, let's face it, heavily reliant on American support. Just look back in history to World War II. Unfortunately, if the Allies remain divided, then the proposal that they can give to Ukraine doesn't look very good. However, of course, there are positives in that you are finally seeing the Europeans in this unified, urgent stance, a stance that, frankly, they should have adopted from the 24th of February 2022. Instead, since that moment, yes, there has been, of course, a lot of military support to Ukraine, but no serious focus on their own armed forces, no real focus. Look at the UK not trying to spend the money required to refill stockpiles that had been depleted with support to Ukraine. So now, when you have the Prime Minister standing on the world stage saying that he is going to contribute troops and jets to this coalition of the willing, people inside the military are asking, what troops, what jets? Haven't you had a look at the actual capacity for the UK to sustain a serious operation? Yes, this is a peacekeeping mission of sorts. It would be a reassurance force on the ground if it were to happen. But the reassurance force needs to be reassuring enough to stop Vladimir Putin from trying to test them. And Russia has been in a war footing since at least since the full-scale invasion. Its economy is churning out weapons at a rate that the Europeans cannot match at the moment. So with all this language and given the severity of the situation, the Prime Minister and other leaders across Europe say they're going to get serious. They now need to show that they are with some action.
Deborah, great stuff. As always, thanks so much for that. Deborah Haynes there in Kiev. While we're, of course, expecting the Prime Minister to update the Commons today with his key conclusions from what was an extraordinary kind of couple of days of international diplomacy. And we'll come to how Prime Minister Starmer sort of comes out of all of it in a moment, Mari. But also this comment from Peter Mandelson yesterday and what we got from the government about that this morning.
Yeah, so just for context, for those who haven't seen it over the weekend, Peter Mandelson, our man in Washington, as it were, was speaking to journalists, and he basically said the onus was on Ukraine to agree a ceasefire before Russia. So let's have a listen to exactly what Peter Mandelson had to say, and then I'll tell you what the government have said in response.
President Zelenskyy giving his unequivocal backing to the initiative that President Trump is taking to end the war and to bring a just and lasting peace to Ukraine. And the Europeans, George, too, they need to back the calls for a ceasefire. And by the way, I think that Ukraine should be the first to commit to a ceasefire and defy the Russians to follow.
So you see that last line in that clip there, which was the most controversial. People were asking themselves, is this the new government position? Well, turns out it is not. So a few moments ago, you were speaking to Luke Pollard, who is the Defence Minister, and you asked him, is this government policy? And if so, if not, what's going on here?
It's certainly right that the war could stop tomorrow if President Putin stopped his illegal and unprovoked aggression. He could stop this war. So what we need to find is a formula that allows a peace that is lasting and durable to be created and then to be defended, because we need to defend this peace. Just as NATO has defended peace in Europe since the Second World War, we will need to find a way of defending that peace in Ukraine as well. So
Peter Mandelson misspoke yesterday?
That's not government policy, and you wouldn't expect me to commentate on every ups and down in negotiations. But we are seeking to find that lasting peace. But it's certainly true that the Ukrainians want peace in their country.
So, Luke Pollard there, really a public slapdown of Peter Mandelson to an extent, and clearly there isn't government officials all singing from the exact same hymn sheet. And it sounds like Peter Mandelson was kind of freewheeling a little bit and perhaps getting a bit carried away, forgetting he's no longer a politician in the way he once was.
Yeah, or being told behind the scenes you can, say things that keep the US on side, but of course then the government confirming it's not official policy yet. Yeah. Very interesting. Murray, as always, thanks so much. Now, the biggest night in film has taken place overnight in LA. Anora has won 5 awards at the 97th Academy Awards, including Best Film, Best Director and Best Actress. Our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer joins us now live from LA. Katie, not out of nowhere, but the scale of success for Anora is a surprise for all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a truly independent film. Sean Baker is one of those directors that people sort of within the indie circuit have talked about for a few years now. But, I mean, compared to the movies that were getting a lot of talk going into this, The Brutalist, Conclave, I think it did come as a little bit of a surprise, certainly, that Anora walked away with Best Picture tonight. It is the story of a Cinderella story, they call it, of sorts, a stripper that falls in love with the son of a Russian oligarch, brilliantly acted by Mikey Madison. Again, I think that was a bit of a surprise because everyone had been assuming that this might be Demi Moore's night for winning her very first Oscar. It was the story that seemed to write itself because she is so well loved and well respected within Hollywood, but it was Mikey Madison that walked away with the award. For Sean Baker, the filmmaker that is behind Anora, out of those 5 awards, he was up on the stage for 4 of those because it is a historic night for him. For one person, it is the first time that one person for one film has accepted 4 awards like that, because he does his own editing, he is the director, he produces it as well, and he wrote it. So look, what a man, what a multi-talented man. Adrian Brody, though, was the winner that we had all been expecting. He was going to walk away with Best Actor for The Brutalist. Can we talk about the chewing gum incident? He obviously forgot that he had been chewing his chewing gum before his name was read out, and then as he walked up those stairs to collect his award, he suddenly remembered. And as you do, you probably want to find somewhere to put it. Did he drop it on the floor? Did he try to hide it on the seat? No, he threw it at his girlfriend, Georgina Chapman, who caught it. And it was, yeah, I'm not sure there's many girlfriends that would be up for doing that. But then he gave a very poignant speech. Look, those speeches on the stage as well, they're only supposed to be 45 seconds. He spoke for 5.5 minutes. It was, they tried to shut him up and to get him to wrap up a bit quicker, and he was having none of it. Here's what he had to say.
I will wrap up. Please turn the music off. I've done this before. Thank you. I'm here once again to represent the lingering traumas and the repercussions of war and systematic oppression and of anti-Semitism and racism. I pray for a more inclusive world.
And Katie, we also heard from Kieran Culkin, Best Supporting Actor. Great speech he did, didn't he?
He was very funny. Actually, thinking about it, he's the one person that we haven't seen here tonight at the Vanity Fair party, but we have seen his brother, the child star, Macaulay Culkin. So he was obviously hoping to catch up with Kieran when he arrives here, if he arrives here. He's obviously off enjoying himself somewhere. But it was a very funny speech that he delivered. I don't know if you remember, but actually he won for Succession at the Golden Globes a year ago. And in that speech, he joked about how, oh, I've won the award award. This is my wife. I said, if I won this award, we'll have a third child. And he gave the speech that he gave tonight. He said, well, my wife then promised, well, if you win an Oscar, you will, I'll give you a fourth child. Here's the speech that he gave. It was very funny.
I swear to God this happened. It was just over a year ago. She said, I will give you 4 when you win an Oscar. And let's get cracking on those kids. What do you say?
Oh, he's great. I love him. Katie, I hear that you have held an Oscar. Is that true?
I have. Well, I've been up close and personal with a few Oscars tonight. The visual effects team behind Dune Part 2, I was lucky enough to hold that Oscar, but I also managed to catch up within the last hour with another historic winner, the first black man to win for Best Costume Design for Wicked. That's Paul, what's his name? Hang on, yes. Paul Taserbo, I believe. And here's what he told me on the carpet.
I mean, I think that, what speaks of the design overall for the way that Nathan Crowley, production designer, and myself, it really defines what the world of Wicked is, where, we were designing into the corners of, of all of the spaces and creating an atmosphere that would, for an audience, would feel like it actually existed.
Paul Tazewell, of course, there. Most of the stars now, look, it's absolutely empty. It was chock-a-block here a couple of hours ago, so the stars were queuing up to go inside and drink the champagne. They are now, I would imagine, fully enjoying themselves, making the most of this very special night. Win or lose, look, I think it has been a very interesting and exciting and unusual set of winners this year, and we're hoping at some point we might just be able to duck inside and get ourselves a glass of champagne. You never know. It might require a little bit of blagging, though.
It is a must, and I back you wholeheartedly, and I'm confident you will deliver. Enjoy. Katie, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. We have a little bit of breaking news to bring you on a different topic altogether, and Israeli police are saying that casualties are reported in a suspected Palestinian shooting in northern city of Haifa. This is just crossing moments ago, and an Israel police spokesperson has said that police forces are en route to the scene following reports of a suspected shooting attack in Haifa. There are initial indications of multiple casualties, though the condition remains unclear. Further details to follow, further details that we will bring you as and when we have them. Right, time now to get you up to speed on all today's other stories. And Leah's got that for us.
I'm still here, standing by. Listen, anyone watching this programme and travelling to work and they're on a train, they will know that fares have gone up. Let's go live now to our correspondent, Ashna Hurinag, who is at London Waterloo for us this morning. Ashna, great to see you. Hit us with the numbers. What can people expect?
Well, the headline is that commuters are going to have to pay hundreds more for their annual train travel, and it doesn't really feel fair to many of them because there is this clear mismatch between the price they're paying and the service they're receiving, according to public transport campaigners. Let's break down some of those numbers, though, for you. If you're travelling from Woking to London on an annual season ticket, which already costs some £4,000, that's going to go up by £187. Another one, York to Leeds, that's a very short distance. People who take that journey know it's under half an hour. Their season ticket is going up by £133. And for the first time since 2013, rail cards, excluding that for those disabled passengers, they're going to become more expensive. A 3-year rail card was £70 and it's now £80. All at a time that we're seeing record low reliability. Research from the PA News Agency has found that the year up until February the 1st, 1 in 25 services had been cancelled. The government, though, recognises this. Operators are up against a tough situation in managing industrial disputes, staff shortages. They say, operators who are represented by the Rail Delivery Group, that they're trying all that they can to do better. They say sometimes the reliability of these services falls below expectations and they're determined to fix that. The government stand by that. They understand the frustration and they say this is the lowest price increase in 3 years.
OK, Ashna, for now, thank you. OK. OK, moving on now. And a woman has been arrested on suspicion of arson after a 4-year-old girl was killed. This is in a house fire in Manchester. She was pulled from the blaze at a property in Rusholme. This was yesterday afternoon, but died from her injuries in hospital. Ministers have outlined plans to abolish the leasehold system in England and Wales. So people who buy their home with a lease buy the right to live there for any given number of years, but they don't own the land itself. Well, Housing Minister Matthew Pennycook says reforms would end unfair practices and unreasonable costs. And the Vatican says the Pope slept well overnight. After an isolated breathing crisis on Friday, the 88-year-old has been in hospital for more than 2 weeks and remains in a stable but complex condition. Doctors say he's not suffering from a fever, but again repeated that he's not out of danger.
Yeah, thank you. Now, the Prime Minister set to update MPs this afternoon on his meetings with European leaders after a suggested coalition of allies could step up and defend a potential peace deal for Ukraine. Well, meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's rebuffed calls from senior US Republicans for him to resign, indicating he would exchange his job only for NATO membership. Wendy Morton joins us now, the Shadow Foreign Office Minister. A very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Morning.
Do you applaud the Prime Minister for how he's handled the last week?
I think, what we've seen is the continuation of the commitment from the UK towards Ukraine, standing shoulder to shoulder with Zelenskyy, Ukraine and its people. And I certainly welcome the announcements we've had over the increase to 2.5%, although it mustn't be, we need to keep going beyond that. And then the announcement over this weekend as well about the 1.6 billion, the loan guarantee to Ukraine. So these are all things that we absolutely welcome. I think now what we need to hear, and I'm hopeful that we will this afternoon when the Prime Minister updates Parliament, is a little bit more detail and clarity as to what was agreed at the summit over the weekend with the European leaders.
How quickly would you like to see us get now to 3%? I mean, I know the pledge from the prior government was only 2.5% by 2030, and clearly the government is moving quicker than that. But a lot of things have changed. When would 3% be warranted?
I mean, you're absolutely right. A lot of things have changed, even in the last few weeks. So I think we need to keep pushing to that 3%. And Kemi's been very, very clear on that. So we will keep pushing the government. Sometimes it can take a little while to get the procurement process up and running, but we absolutely need to get on with this. It's time to go beyond words, and we need actions, and we need to deliver.
And with hindsight, would have been great to have got to 2.5% quicker.
Well, look, we had a very clear plan to get to 2.5%, which I think was important. But I think it's also important to recognise that the situation has changed so much. And let's stay focused now on delivering.
As we sort of sit here today, will our partnership and our relations with Europe need to be stronger than we would have thought, given the sort of lack of reliability, perhaps, coming out of the White House?
I think what we've seen in the last few days and over the weekend is that the UK and the US have a very strong relationship. We've been allies for a long, long time on key areas, Five Eyes, defence, security, intelligence, on a day-to-day basis. But what we're seeing now is Europe needing to come together to deal with the situation in Ukraine. And let's not forget, Putin illegally invaded Ukraine. Ukraine is on the edge of Europe. So what happens in Ukraine matters, of course, to Ukraine, but it matters to Europe. It matters to us in the UK, just as it matters to the US as well.
In terms of the relationship between President Zelenskyy and President Trump, I mean, there's clearly pressure for him to step aside as leader of Ukraine. Is that something he should consider if it's the pragmatic way forward to repair relations?
I think at this moment in time, what we need more than anything we need calmness, we need pragmatism, and we need to find a way through this. But and when it comes to Zelenskyy, he was the democratically elected president of Ukraine. So any decision should be for the Ukrainian people. I'm fortunate I've been to Ukraine twice, once before the war and once during the war. I've met with politicians, I've met with people in Ukraine. I think in all of this, it's important we don't forget the Ukrainian people either.
Pragmatism, you said, clear head going forward, Prime Minister's displayed that in the last week?
I think what we've seen from the Prime Minister is he's been building on the work and the role that the UK has led the way in over a number of years. The UK was there at the beginning when Russia illegally invaded Ukraine. We were there supporting Ukraine, and indeed before that. And I see this as very much a continuation of that, and we need to see that continue to move with that. But the key thing now from the Prime Minister is that we, the parliamentarians and the UK, have a little bit more clarity about what was agreed at Lancaster House.
And just finally, Peter Mandelson to ABC yesterday afternoon suggested that Ukraine should move ahead of Russia and declare that they want a ceasefire, almost to sort of urge Russia to follow suit, something that the government told us this morning was not formal government policy. In this age that we're in and where relations are, is it okay for the ambassador to go a little further than policy in order to appeal to the US administration and I guess be pragmatic and keep everyone on side?
I was a little surprised by those comments. And actually this goes to the heart of part of the issue here is what we do not want is a running commentary. I think there will be discussions that need to be had between leaders behind closed doors, then statements are made. But I find it rather strange that an ambassador would be coming out making statements such as that, and maybe Mr Mandelson should reflect a little.
Great stuff. Wendy Morton, thanks for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Let's have a look now at the weather.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The next few days will be largely dry and settled, though spells of wet and windy weather will try to move in from the northwest. Overnight cloud and rain will have moved south across Scotland into northern England and Northern Ireland over the course of this morning, followed by clear spells and blustery showers for the far north of Scotland. Further south, it's a cold start with a widespread frost and fog patches. That's your weather.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
So to come here on The Breakfast Show, Sky News meets President Zelenskyy. We'll speak to Yalda about her sit-down late last night with the President of Ukraine just before he left the UK. Also still to come, we'll talk about the glitz, the glamour and the fashion on the red carpet at the Oscars.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirm that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting.
Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. As you can see, Sam has joined us here to discuss all of the latest from Westminster. We'll have that in just a moment. We'll also be joined by Yalda to discuss her interview last night with President Zelenskyy. But first, a reminder of all of the day's top stories. Leah's got that for us.
Thank you, Wilfred. The Prime Minister is expected to update MPs this afternoon on talks with European leaders to defend Ukraine against Russia and secure lasting peace. Responding to calls from US Republicans for him to resign, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy told Sky News that he would go if Ukraine was allowed to join NATO.
They'll have to negotiate with me, and I said that I'm exchanging it for NATO membership.
Armed Forces Minister Luke Pollard told this programme that the UK believed Ukraine's rightful place was within NATO, but he said the call for Britain's ambassador to Washington, that's Peter Mandelson, for Ukraine to declare a unilateral ceasefire was not government policy. Israeli police forces say multiple casualties have been reported in a suspected shooting in the northern city of Haifa. Israel's ambulance service says 6 people have been injured, 2 of which are in a critical condition. And Anora has won big at this year's Oscars, scooping 5 Academy Awards in total. It's about a sex worker who has a chance of a Cinderella story when she marries a Russian oligarch. Meanwhile, Adrian Brody was named Best Actor for his role in The Brutalist.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. Well, our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, is here, as you can see. Good morning to you, Sam.
Hello there.
This time last week, or I forget exactly which day it was, on the podcast, you were saying of all of the diplomatic meetings that were taking place last week, we were focusing on the Prime Ministers with President Trump, but the one that really mattered was going to be Zelenskyy and Trump. I guess that was an accurate prediction, but in light of that as well, could the Prime Minister have done any better than he did in light of how events unfolded in front of him?
No, I thought that the Prime Minister could justifiably be pretty happy with the last few days. Look, in some senses, there's been a bit of luck for Keir Starmer in the way that he had the meeting with Donald Trump on Thursday.
The other way around would have been impossible to have.
It would, exactly. But really, I'm much more of the belief that in politics you make your own luck. And that is absolutely what Keir Starmer has done, and done in spades over the last few days. Look, you've got to give him some credit because he's taken a gamble. What he's done is he's taken some of the diplomatic credit, some of the sort of chips that he earned on Thursday, and then spent them on Friday and Saturday by being in constant touch with President Trump, also organising the meeting with President Zelenskyy, also convening the meeting with the 18 other European leaders in order. And I think the thing he's done the most successfully, and I think there are some dangers in what he's done, but the thing he's done most successfully is restore a sense of order after what felt like absolute abject chaos on Friday lunchtime, Friday evening, UK time. You know, at that point, at the end of that 40-minute meeting with Donald Trump and President Zelenskyy, it was really uncertain where we were going to go. But what Keir Starmer has done is taken the heat out of the situation, introduced a process, sort of clarified everybody's goals, got Europe on the same side, stopped it attacking Donald Trump, helped amplify the increases in defence spending from the European side, and generally try to bring the two sides back together. We'll see whether ultimately it works, but I think there is much more of a structure and sense of direction here on Monday morning than there was at 6 o'clock on Friday night.
It seems, I mean, there's a big question, of course, of how that all unfolds, which is hugely important. On the domestic politics of it all, though, I wasn't quite clear yesterday on whether or not the Prime Minister was suggesting they do want to get to 3% quicker than next Parliament or not. I mean, there's certainly rhetoric around saying that the willing have to step up and shoulder the burden. Macron said 3 to 3.5%. Is that out of the window, or is there going to be pressure for Rachel Reeves to find the money to do more than 2.5% by 2027?
Well, I think the pressure is coming from the Tories who are now calling for that acceleration, although I note that Kemi Badenoch, in calling for it in time for breakfast TV yesterday, said that she wasn't going to work out how to pay for it in time for breakfast TV yesterday, which led me to raise one quizzical eyebrow. I think the challenge is different. I think the challenge is actually going to be whether the money can be spent effectively and efficiently. Look, you're going to throw a large amount of cash, about £6 billion, with 13 billion if you take the growth that there would have been anyway, between now and 2027 at the defence sector. And I think that if that looks like it's going towards things that are globally useful and in the British interest, then there'll be a debate about speeding that up post-2027. But there's another world in which some of the spending is simply money transferred to the Ukrainian military, which would count under our 2.5/3%, or is spent on manufacturers overseas, or is not spent well. In which case, I don't think there'd be much pressure to go beyond 2.5% because or 3% because that money hadn't been spent effectively.
Really interesting. By the way, on the point of coming to Rachel Reeves and the spring statement, bond yields have eased a little bit for other factors in the last couple of weeks. So we'll see whether they escape ahead of the spring statement without having to make massive other changes. What about the cabinet more broadly? Obviously, Annalise Dodds resigned, wasn't happy with the use of the aid budget to fund defence. Is most of the cabinet on board with what the Prime Minister has done in the last couple of days, or is there disagreement behind the scenes? As you said, it's been a pretty successful week for him, so it's hard to criticise.
Annalise Dodds was the Shadow Chancellor in opposition, but her resignation on Friday was like a leaf falling in the forest. I'm not sure it caused much ripple. I think the Cabinet will be delighted with the optics of this weekend. Keir Starmer has put himself firmly at the centre of a global conversation, a difficult global conversation, where he, and uniquely he, can, with some justification, be able to tell other world leaders that he's got the ear of Donald Trump, ear of President Zelenskyy, and is able to convene 18 other European leaders plus Canada round the table on a very cold Sunday afternoon, and can justifiably say, I'm the guy with a plan to take the temperature down at a point where others, look at Germany, are sort of inflaming things. Only President Macron of France is in the same league. And as it happens, well, Macron beat Keir Starmer to the White House. Keir Starmer beat Macron to one of those sort of big global summits. So, I think it will be seen as all win from the Cabinet's point of view.
What's your take on this Mandelson comment yesterday to ABC to suggest that the Ukrainians should unilaterally declare a ceasefire and try and see if Putin follows? I mean, we had the government on this morning who said that's not government policy.
I mean, I was pretty flabbergasted, to be honest. I heard Peter Mandelson say it, and it just felt like he was an outrider for the government saying something authorised by Downing Street. The big fear in appointing Peter Mandelson has always been that he'd start saying things in the media that he wasn't supposed to. And there are some in government who gently point out that if you look at the Sunday papers week after week, there are comments from friends of Mandelson sort of talking about what strategy should be. And they read those with one raised eyebrow. And I think if he's freelancing, if he was genuinely freelancing on ABC yesterday, then I think that's a matter for concern, and he could be in some trouble. I do slightly wonder, because sometimes you slap something down even though you were quite keen on him saying it. Let's just say there are a lot of dark arts involved, so I'm not 100% sure that the story is as straightforward as Mandelson freelances, government slaps him down, because he might have been getting out a message through slightly nefarious means. But there's a bigger policy question, I think, here, Wilf, and it's a really, really important one. And it's the question of ends, and the whole row is on this. The question is, what does a peace deal look like? For sure, there are two bits of territory: the territory acquired by Russia after 2014, and then the territory more recently acquired after 2022. Is it the case, and it does look like this to me, that Britain is shifting its rhetoric, and rather than saying that Russia must be defeated, there is greater enthusiasm for some kind of ceasefire sooner rather than later, because that's what Donald Trump wants? But could that be at the expense of some of that post-2022 land that Russia has captured not being handed back? What does actually a deal look like in territorial terms? The American National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, saying very clearly they've got to be territorial kind of compromises by Ukraine. Ursula von der Leyen walking straight out of that Lancaster House summit yesterday saying that the reverse was true. I do think that one of the things rhetorically that happened yesterday is that we got a lot muddier and a lot softer on what the peace deal might look like, and that could come at the expense of Ukraine's borders and where they sit. Keir Starmer talking about the line on the telly yesterday morning. And I think all of that, we're just a lot less robust than we had been on. And that's what Peter Mandelson's comments spoke to, but also a bit of what Keir Starmer was talking about.
Oh, that's certainly. I mean, if you watch all of the US discussions, certainly where the territory line is now seems like the best Ukraine can hope for, and it's much more a fight of what guarantees they get for the rest of the territory. But as always, fascinating, Sam, and everyone can subscribe to Politics at...
Sam and Anne's, although you type Jack and Sam's, but that'll change before long. Politics at Sam and Anne's, wherever you get your podcasts.
And the QR code's on the screen right now for you. If you haven't subscribed already, well worth it. We're going to have a quick break here on The Breakfast Show. When we come back, we'll talk about all the glitz and the glamour on the red carpet at the Oscars.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
All alcohol products, not just wine, will have labels warning of liver disease and the link to fatal cancers.
Is it crazy? It's an industry worth around €14 billion a year. That's why Italy sees this Irish plan as such a threat. It's always instructive and occasionally entertaining to hear what Donald Trump has to say on the issue of Brexit.
She's got her own way of doing it, that's okay.
The job takes me to every corner of this island.
The rioting stemmed from a horrific daytime stabbing attack at a primary school in the city centre.
The scale of the rioting and the destruction it caused is pretty much unprecedented here in Dublin.
Jerry, any comment on the judge's decisions? Do you feel vindicated, Jerry? This is the end, the somewhat chaotic end, of a 52-day trial.
Micheál Martin could be set to head back to government with the Taoiseach Simon Harris.
Are you confident that you can now return as Taoiseach?
I'm cautiously optimistic and excited.
A mystery press conference hastily called. Leo Varadkar strode out and didn't disappoint.
I am resigning as President and Leader of Fine Gael effective today.
The people here sometimes feel they're somewhat neglected by the Irish government, to the extent that this place is sometimes known as the Forgotten County.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks, but none have ever been found.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach.
This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Sky News, get the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back. Just wanted to bring you an update on that breaking news that we brought you about half an hour ago. You'll remember that we told you that police forces were en route to a scene of a shooting in Haifa, suspected shooting of various casualties, and they were investigating that. We've just had an update on that from the MDA, that's the emergency services in Israel, and they're saying that paramedics have pronounced a 70-year-old male dead and are treating 4 patients. 3 are in serious conditions, a male and a female in their 30s and a 15-year-old male. A 70-year-old female is in a moderate condition. This just coming across from emergency services there in Haifa, and we'll bring you more on it as and when we have it. Now, Anora has won big at the 97th Academy Awards, winning 5 awards, including Best Film, Best Director and Best Actress for Mikey Madison. With Leah and I now to discuss all of the fashion from the evening, Lydia Slater, Harper's Bazaar's editor-in-chief and former retail editor of British Vogue, Ginny Chadwick-Healy. Very good morning to you both. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
So clearly this night is as much about the fashion always as it is, you know, the awards and the films. What jumped out for you, Lydia, most of all on the red carpet? Well,
I thought actually throughout this whole awards season that the Wicked stars have really been giving some amazing looks, and I thought, again, well, I mean, tonight's obviously, or last night was the sort of culmination of all of it. And I thought both Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo looked amazing, and actually so did Michelle Yeoh. So they really brought some sort of drama to the red carpet, I thought.
And I'll add to that, Halle Berry looked sensational. It's like this metallic construction. How do they sit down during the ceremony when the outfits are so elaborate? Ginny, what do you think of that?
Do you know a lot goes into it? I mean, how Ariana Grande even got through the door, I don't know. But there's so much preparation. It isn't just a quick decision. And this is a huge part of the fashion industry as well. Against a backdrop, obviously, of so much going on in the LA fires, there was a quiet calm to the night. I felt like nobody got it wrong. And this was a beautiful Louis Vuitton piece. Yeah. You know, Emerald City in a dress. That's what we were thinking.
Can I ask a silly question about the one we just saw beforehand, the Ariana Grande one? Because if you can't actually sit down in it, I mean, to what extent does it verge on the ridiculous? You know, is this just to make a statement? I mean, it's clearly not a dress that's going to fly off the shelf.
I mean, it was on the couture catwalk, so it is a dress that somebody's going to buy and wear. But they obviously, Ariana changed to do her performance. So I think these are, you know, you make the statement on the red carpet in a dress, and then you may well change. And in fact, I think they changed again before they went to the after party. So, you know, this is about that one moment that you just want to make a huge impact.
I think we should spend some time talking about the guys on the red carpet too, because I think Andrew Garfield had this really beautiful brown suit, and then Timothée Chalamet had this like yellow,
I loved it,
all-in-one number. What did you think of that, Ginny?
So that was Givenchy, and
gorgeous.
Sarah Burton has taken over at Givenchy, and I just thought it was beautiful. I think this will become a thing across both men and women's wear. It's a bold statement. There were some brilliant comments about it. He didn't win, but he has this cool calm and charm that he could pull off a yellow suit at the Oscars. It was really, I thought, exquisite.
I always feel bad for the men as well, because they don't really have that chance to shine. And in fact, quite a lot of them did this time, so I liked it.
Some of us are glad we don't have to be encouraged.
We want to see you in a yellow suit tomorrow.
It would be just very painful.
You've got a lovely tie on that's quite striking.
With a blue suit.
And I just wonder about, you know, you mentioned this, Ginny, the planning that goes into this. Are we talking like weeks, months, years?
Weeks, months, but if you're anyone like Emma Stone, you're already signed up with Louis Vuitton. That's part of a huge licensing deal that is carried over months and certainly years. And the trajectory of winning an Oscar obviously then propels you into this space of working with the biggest brands in the world. And that is a huge, huge opportunity, particularly for the younger.
Lydia, maybe this is a vulgar question, but is there a lot of money in this? Do the stars, even if they don't have a sort of enduring 5-year deal with a fashion label, do they get paid a lot to do this, or is it the other way around? Are they just so excited to get a free, fantastic
I mean, I think it depends on the sort of level of the star, but yes, at the top level, there's really big money involved.
Like what type of amount? Well, millions for one night or hundreds of thousands?
No, it'll be a campaign, won't it? So Chanel will have dressed, you know, their stars, and that will be an agreement. But it's a huge amount of work for the stylists behind the scenes. They don't get nearly as enough praise, you know. They are having everybody throw every idea at them, and they have to stick to what their client feels calm, confident and comfortable in.
Well, here on that front. often the beneficiary of some fantastic starts.
Completely.
Such
And
that, amazingly, I
Katie.
haven't been fired for each morning because they make us make me look presentable. Guys, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you.
much appreciated, Ginny and Lydia. Now let's turn back to the other lead story, extraordinary unfolding news overnight on so many areas. One area, of course, is the war in Ukraine. As Keir Starmer hosted various European leaders yesterday, and, of course, President Zelenskyy. Well, we're going to hear from Yalda in just a moment because Yalda was sitting there next to President Zelenskyy, firing questions at him. Let's listen to a couple of the key takeaways.
Has there been any communication with the administration since the Oval Office meeting? Have they reached out to you? And separately, you talked about resignation a few days ago. How are you thinking about elections?
There is communication. Not on my level. Yes. As regards resignation, my resignation, if I am to be changed and I'll hear, how can I put it, with what's happening with the support to change me, it will not be easy because it is not enough to simply hold elections. I said that I'm exchanging it for NATO membership. And then it means that I fulfilled my mission. There is NATO. It means I've fulfilled my mission. Although, honestly, it looks like the people, and I'll not be calling their posts, naming their posts, but the citizens of other countries are telling Ukrainians which president they should have, especially if these people occupy official posts. It seems to me a bit undemocratic and unconstructive.
Yeah, they're absolutely fascinating stuff, obviously, just before he then left the UK and took off back to Ukraine last night. I mean, overall, what was his mood, his vibe? Was he seeming exhausted and rattled or in fact, quite resolute?
Wilf, good morning. You know, it was quite something to observe. Like I said, I was sitting right beside him at that round table, and I was observing over that hour and a bit that we spent with him in the room. This was a man that didn't appear rattled, actually. I think he was initially rattled after what happened, after the incident, but certainly not, you know, when he walked into that room. There was this feeling that European leaders had embraced him, had reassured him, and made him feel as though he and his country were not alone. Now, this was a hugely difficult tightrope for Sir Keir Starmer to walk, and it appears like he's stepped up to the mark by embracing him here in London for that summit. But what I saw last night was a man that was as defiant, as resolute as we've seen over the course of the last 3 years. I mean, at the very end, Wilf, I was standing next to him as, you know, all the journalists sort of got up to leave the room. And I looked at him and I said, it's been a difficult few days. And he said, actually, it's been a difficult couple of weeks. And I said, actually, it's probably just been a difficult few years. And he said, yeah, I can't tell you how hard it's all been. And so clearly it has rattled him on some level. But Wilf, they're not going to give up on their country. That is the sense I got. And you heard him there when I asked him about cause for him to resign. It didn't feel like he was going to bow down to any of those calls. He said it's undemocratic for citizens of other countries to interfere in our affairs. There was also a question in the room about whether he would apologize to President Trump. And at one point he said, I don't view my country as above anyone, and I don't view it as below anyone. We are equals when it comes to our partners, and we are fighting a war because a full-scale invasion was launched on our country, and we are fighting for freedom and democracy. So nothing about what he said over the course of the last few years, Wilf, feels like it has changed. What made him a spectacular communicator and what's made him so spectacular on the world stage over the last 3 years clearly backfired on Friday at the Oval Office. But I think he's had some time to reflect. Doesn't feel like he's got major regrets about what he said. I think he regrets that it unfolded the way it did, and he didn't really want to talk about the incident, but he certainly wasn't backing down.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating, Yalda, hearing you say that. And by the way, the UK government Defence Minister Luke Pollard did echo kind of what you're saying Zelenskyy said there, which is that it's for him to decide and his people to decide who's in charge. And they also recommitted that they do think Ukraine will one day join NATO, which of course is at odds with what President Trump said. Just want to explore a little bit more his views looking back on that meeting. We're watching it on the screen now with President Trump. I mean, as you said, no one can understand like he has what he's been through over the last 3 years. And I think a lot of people here have sympathy with that. But on a purely PR basis, dealing with the man he now has to deal with in the White House, do you really think he doesn't have regrets that he didn't play it slightly differently? Even if he shouldn't have had to, might he have got more for his country if he'd played it differently?
You know, Wilf, he was asked in the room whether he thought it was an ambush or a setup, and he didn't want to engage. He said, look, we'll leave that for the history books. We asked him what happened afterwards, whether he was thrown out. Again, didn't want to be drawn into all of that. I mean, no doubt. He was coached throughout the week. We saw Emmanuel Macron there last Monday, carefully choreograph, you know, his dealing with Donald Trump. And then, of course, we saw Sir Keir Starmer. He was coached by his fellow European leaders. But I think the sense I got from him was, you know, that things were really bubbling up under the surface, and they finally just emerged and came out on top of the surface.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. We really appreciate it. We're going to have a quick look at the weather.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The next few days will be largely dry and settled, though spells of wet and windy weather will try to move in from the northwest. Overnight cloud and rain will have moved south across Scotland into northern England and Northern Ireland this morning. That's your weather.
The perfect climate, whatever the forecast. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
On today's show, 48 hours after his bust-up with President Trump, President Zelenskyy tells Sky News he'll only stand aside if Ukraine can join NATO.
Well, a rebuff to the UK's main man in Washington, Peter Mandelson. The government tells this programme that his call for Ukraine to declare a ceasefire first is not their policy.
Plus, we're live with the stars at Vanity Fair's Oscar after-party.
It's Monday, the 3rd of March. Your headlines. The UK rolls out the red carpet for President Zelenskyy, who hits back at US Republicans calling on him to go.
You talked about resignation a few days ago. How are you thinking about elections?
They'll have to negotiate with me, and I said that I'm exchanging it for NATO membership.
The Prime Minister announces a coalition of the willing to guarantee peace in Ukraine. Plus,
after the diplomatic drama of the past few days, Ukraine's president returns home, where Russia's war is still raging.
and breaking news, one person has been killed and 4 injured in a stabbing attack in the Israeli city of Haifa. We'll bring you the latest.
Anora.
Anora sweeps the Oscars with awards for Best Picture, Best Director and Best Actress.
After a film about a stripper was revealed as this year's big Oscar winner, here at the Vanity Fair party, the stars are busy celebrating.
A very good morning to you. It's the beginning of another huge week for European diplomacy and the future of Ukraine. President Zelensky's rebuffed calls from senior US Republicans for him to resign, telling Sky News he would exchange his job for NATO membership. And the government has rebuffed suggestions from the US Ambassador Peter Mandelson that Ukraine should be the first to declare a ceasefire. We'll hear from Mari and Sam on all of that and much more in just a moment. But first, a reminder of an extraordinary 24 hours of diplomacy here in the UK. The Prime Minister was hosting President Zelenskyy and 19 other world leaders, as well as NATO's Secretary-General, at Lancaster House yesterday. He's expected to update MPs this afternoon on a 4-point plan that was discussed yesterday, aiming to end the war. The summit agreed to keep military aid flowing to Ukraine, to insist that Kiev is represented at peace talks, to boost its defences in the event of a deal, and to build a coalition of the willing to guarantee peace. Well, then, Yalda Hakim spoke to President Zelenskyy just before he flew back to Ukraine.
Has there been any communication with the administration since the Oval Office meeting? Have they reached out to you? And separately, you talked about resignation a few days ago. How are you thinking about elections?
There is communication, not on my level. Yes. As regards resignation, my resignation, if I am to be changed, and I'll hear, how can I put it, with what's happening with the support to change me, it will not be easy, because it is not enough to simply hold elections. I said that I'm exchanging it for NATO membership, and then it means that I fulfilled my mission. There is NATO. It means I've fulfilled my mission. Although, honestly, it looks like the people, and I'll not be calling their posts, naming their posts, but the citizens of other countries are telling Ukrainians which president they should have, especially if these people occupy official posts. It seems to me a bit undemocratic and unconstructive.
President Zelenskyy with Yalda Hakim last night. We're expecting to hear more from the Prime Minister in the Commons today. Maybe we'll get to that in just a moment. But, Mari, the one thing we haven't mentioned yet that also happened yesterday was Peter Mandelson on US TV, and we discussed that a bit with the government earlier.
Yeah, it was a really interesting moment, wasn't it, where yesterday Peter Mandelson, the UK ambassador to the US, said that actually he felt that Ukraine should kind of make the first step when it came to issuing a ceasefire ahead of Russia, as it were. And a lot of people kind of felt for a second, is that government policy? A lot of eyebrows were raised. And then you asked exactly that to Luke Pollard, the Defence Minister, this morning, and he very clearly said absolutely not.
President Zelenskyy giving his unequivocal backing to the initiative that President Trump is taking to end the war and to bring a just and lasting peace to Ukraine. And the Europeans, George, too, they need to back the calls for a ceasefire. And by the way, I think that Ukraine should be the first to commit to a ceasefire and defy the Russians to follow.
That's not government policy, and you wouldn't expect me to commentate on every ups and down in the negotiations. But we are seeking to find that lasting peace. But it's certainly true that the Ukrainians want peace in their country.
I mean, Murray, fascinating to hear it so explicit from the government. That's not government policy.
Yeah, exactly that. So a bit of a public slapdown. And I think what Sam was talking about was it's one of two things, right? So either Mandelson is freewheeling a little bit and getting a bit carried away with his newfound position, or perhaps there's been something going on behind the scenes in which they want to appeal to an American audience in a different way on US soil. So, yeah.
I guess, Sam, the question will be whether we get more examples of this in the days, weeks and months ahead.
Well, it was the danger in appointing Peter Mandelson, but what he said yesterday wasn't government policy. I think the real question is, there were two other real questions. Was it helpful or unhelpful, both to align the UK with US interests and to show that it's listening and to send a bit of a message to President Zelenskyy? And secondly, did Downing Street know that he was going to do this or not? So the government minister answered on the first, but not the other two, which are as, if not more, important. There will be discomfort around what Lord Mandelson says, because an immediate ceasefire implies that Ukraine cannot fight back to regain the territory lost to the Russians since, well, particularly 2022. And there does seem to be a debate about whether or not Russia's going to get that back. But at the same time, if you take the general poise rather than the specifics, what Lord Mandelson is sort of saying to President Zelenskyy is a tough message that you're also getting from people like NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, which is you might have to do some compromising here. Yeah. Compromising in order to see a way through this. And I think that is something that the Americans will welcome allies saying, but the question is it realistic? Is it where the Europeans are? And in this game of push me, pull you, does it shift the dial?
Sam, we were talking last hour to Yalda about the mood of President Zelenskyy, where, of course, she was sort of sitting right next to him. What's the mood of Prime Minister Starmer after this week? It's been a draining week, an important week, but has it energised him?
I'm sure it has. Look, he has gambled and it looks like his luck has paid off. It's not luck, you make your own luck in politics. But he had a successful visit to see President Trump in the White House on Thursday. He got a lot of credit from Trump. He then cashed in some of that credit by getting Trump to speak to him on Friday night and on Saturday night, as all of the kind of ramifications and in the aftermath of that disastrous meeting in the Oval Office on Friday lunchtime with President Zelenskyy was kind of shaking up global politics. And then he was able to convene 18 other world leaders on Sunday. So he's put himself at the centre of a urgent and vital global conversation. He's looked like the grown-up in the room. He's taken the temperature down. He has imposed order where, frankly, it all looked a bit chaotic on Friday night. Those are big wins.
And Murray, he keeps the focus on this topic today. He goes to Parliament?
Yes, exactly. So he's giving a statement we expect this afternoon to the House of Commons. But also, before that, he's actually hosting SME, small and medium-sized businesses in Downing Street, all specifically around the defence sector, really trying to show and demonstrate that boosting defence spending is good for jobs and good for growth.
Great stuff, guys. As always, thanks very much, Murray, Sam. Now, to the breaking news that we brought you last hour. Israeli police are responding to a stabbing terror attack in the northern city of Haifa. Emergency services say a 70-year-old has died and 4 others injured during the attack at a bus station. 3 of those are in a serious condition. They include a male and female in their 30s and a 15-year-old boy. Israeli authorities say the attacker has been killed. Now, the biggest night in film has taken place in Los Angeles. Anora has won 5 awards at the 97th Academy Awards, including Best Film, Best Director and Best Actress. Let's get out to our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer. Katie, a huge win for Anora. We listed 3 of the awards, but there were 5.
Yeah, absolutely. 5. 4 of them going to the filmmaker Sean Baker himself, because he is the producer, he wrote it, he's the director, and he edits it. And that in itself is historic. Nobody's ever done that before. But it is a terrific film, thoroughly deserving. We now have seen pretty much all of the cast go inside. Mikey Madison passed by our way within the last hour, as has Sean Baker. Very much looking forward to celebrating, he said, and he had a big smile on his face, quite understandably. But look, it's been a really interesting ceremony this year, a night of long speeches, historic wins, and a chewing gum incident. Take a look.
Anora. At this year's Academy Awards, the big reveal, a film about a stripper winning Best Picture. One of 5 awards for Anora, 4 for filmmaker Sean Baker, who makes history as the first person to win that many for one film in one night.
This film was made on the blood, sweat, and tears of incredible indie artists, and long live independent film.
It's young star Mikey Madison beating Demi Moore to Best Actress.
This is a dream come true. I'm probably going to wake up tomorrow.
Adrian Brody's girlfriend deserving of her own prize for almost catching his gum. The Brutalist star refusing to be played off stage.
I will wrap up. Please turn the music off. I've done this before. Thank you.
Delivering a 5.5-minute speech to match his film's lengthy runtime.
I'm here once again to represent the lingering traumas and the repercussions of war and systematic oppression and of anti-Semitism and racism. I pray for a more inclusive world.
Winning for Emilia Perez, Zoe Saldana had quite the list of thanks.
To my husband with that beautiful hair.
And more seriously,
I am a proud child of immigrant parents. My grandmother, if she were here, she would be so delighted.
Kieran Culkin reminding his wife of a promise she made a year ago about another baby.
She turned to me, I swear to God this happened, it was just over a year ago. She said, I will give you 4 when you win an Oscar. Let's get cracking on those kids. What do you say? I love you. I love you, Zizu and Booba. I love you.
But the night's biggest round of applause going to those who battled California's wildfires. Defying not only gravity, but some of the hardest few months in Hollywood's history. Katie Spencer, Sky News in Los Angeles.
Oh, what a night, Katie. 2 things. You have held an Oscar, which is incredible, but also you're going to go to the after party after this at all?
It's only on for another 45 minutes, so I don't like to say that you guys are cramping my style, but you're cramping my style. But I can hear the music playing inside. Judging, going on previous years, the drink is free-flowing. This is when you get to see the celebrities unfiltered, having a bit of a dance inside, so it's always quite fun. And I don't know if I'm slightly delirious through jet lag, but I swore I heard the Star Wars theme playing, but I just asked my cameraman and he didn't hear it, so it might well be that I'm going absolutely mad. But it might be that they're paying tribute to one of the sci-fi winners this year. It wasn't Star Wars, but Dune Part 2 was honoured, particularly the British visual effects guys. They let me hold on to their Oscars. Paul Lambert was the winner, and here, look, here is me holding an Oscar. I was very proud and excited.
Anora. At this year's Academy Awards, the big reveal, a film about a stripper winning Best Picture. One of 5 awards for Anora.
Can I be really cheeky and have a little lift of this?
Oh my goodness.
Whoa, this is brilliant. Oh my God, they're heavy, aren't they? So where do you keep your other one as well, and where will this one go?
Oh, that's amazing, Katie. How heavy does it feel in reality, an Oscar?
I don't have the strongest arm muscles, which may be a fault on my part and the lack of going down the gym, but it felt very heavy. Sort of lightish bowling ball, I'd say. Yeah, very heavy. But I think we all need to reassess our careers and figure out how we're going to win our own Oscar now. I need to go in and get some tips.
You do. You need to go in, have a coffee, maybe some champagne, and just know you've done a stellar job and you look fantastic too.
Thanks.
We've got your back. OK, moving on to some other news now. And anyone watching this programme, while they travel to work on the train perhaps this morning, will know that fares have gone up. Ashna Huranag has the latest for you from London Waterloo Station.
Well, the headline is that commuters are going to have to pay hundreds more for their annual train travel, and it doesn't really feel fair to many of them because there is this clear mismatch between the price they're paying and the service they're receiving, according to public transport campaigners. Let's break down some of those numbers, though, for you. If you're travelling from Woking to London on an annual season ticket, which already costs some £4,000, that's going to go up by £187. Another one, York to Leeds, that's a very short distance. People who take that journey know it's under half an hour. Their season ticket is going up by £133. And for the first time since 2013, rail cards, excluding that for those disabled passengers, they're going to become more expensive. A 3-year rail card was £70 and it's now £80. All at a time that we're seeing record low reliability. Research from the PA News Agency has found that the year up until February the 1st, 1 in 25 services had been cancelled. The government, though, recognises this. Operators are up against a tough situation in managing industrial disputes, staff shortages. They say, operators who are represented by the Rail Delivery Group, that they're trying all that they can to do better. They say sometimes the reliability of these services falls below expectations and they're determined to fix that. The government stand by that. They understand the frustration and they say this is the lowest price increase in 3 years.
A woman's been arrested on suspicion of arson. This is after a 4-year-old girl was killed in a house fire in Manchester. She was pulled from the blaze at a property in Rusholme yesterday, but died from her injuries in hospital. Ministers have outlined plans to abolish the leasehold system in England and Wales. People who buy their home with a lease buy the right to live there for a given number of years, but not own the land themselves. Housing Minister Matthew Pennycook says reforms would end unfair practices and unreasonable costs. And the Vatican says the Pope slept well overnight after an isolated breathing crisis on Friday. The 88-year-old has been in hospital for more than 2 weeks and remains in a stable but complex condition. Doctors say he's not suffering from a fever, but again repeated, he's not out of danger.
Leah, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. Let's have a look at the weather now.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The next few days will be largely dry and settled, though spells of wet and windy weather will try to move in from the northwest. Overnight, cloud and rain has moved south across Scotland into northern England and Northern Ireland, followed by clear spells and blustery showers for the far north of Scotland. Further south, it's a cold start with a widespread frost and fog patches. It remains largely dry on Monday with freezing, fog lifting and clearing to sunny spells. Thicker cloud will bring patchy light rain to parts of western Scotland.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
So to come here on The Breakfast Show, we'll be discussing the government increasing pressure, or potentially increasing pressure, on China to release the jailed pro-democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai. We'll be joined by his son before he delivers a letter to Downing Street.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirm that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister.
My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Welcome back. More than 4 years ago, one of Hong Kong's most influential pro-democracy campaigners, Jimmy Lai, was detained, and today he's still locked up under the controversial national security law. The 77-year-old British citizen has been in solitary confinement, and his family say his health is deteriorating. Today, they will once again appeal to the Prime Minister to help secure his release. I'm delighted to say that Jimmy's son, Sebastian Lai, joins me now. Very good morning to you, Sebastian. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Today, you're planning to deliver a letter by hand to 10 Downing Street. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. We have outstanding requests to meet with the Prime Minister. As you said before, my father's health has gone quite a bit worse. So, it's about releasing him, but it's also about saving his life.
And the timing in particular of why now? Just get us up to speed on this 4-year process. He's been giving evidence in a court case. You're expecting the verdict soon?
Yeah, so the trial started at the end of 2023, after my father had already been in jail for almost 3 years. It's gone on for more than a year now. The trial will end sometime this year. We still don't know, because there's been many delays and whatnot. But hopefully it'll end by the end of this year. But it's one of those cases where we can't wait for any longer. My father turned 78 this year, solitary confinement has done horrible things to his health, to his body. He's still strong mentally and spiritually, but he's in the body of a 77-year-old, and it's one of those situations where we can't wait.
Have you been able to speak with him or not?
So unfortunately, because I speak out on his behalf, I can't go back to Hong Kong. Under the national security law, even appearing on Sky with you right now could land me in jail in Hong Kong.
What about on the other side? What has the UK government been saying? Has it changed at all since the new government came in? Are you optimistic that they will fight your cause sufficiently to get him released, or is that a really tall order?
So our current government's position is that my father should be released immediately and unconditionally. And we've been very grateful for that. As you know, he's a British citizen. It's the only citizenship that he holds. Whether I'm optimistic, look, it's been 4 years, and it can get quite depressing sometimes. But I think if you think about it in terms of the Hong Kong government, it's a costless way to show good faith on their part to the UK government.
Do you think that the UK government is in a position to push for a lot, specifically with China at the moment. We're at an interesting kind of moment. Rachel Reeves went there recently.
Yeah.
Clearly there's a desire on some level to have a slightly more pragmatic economic relationship than perhaps under Rishi Sunak. Do you think that provides an opportunity or actually a threat? If they want to get investment from China, are they going to want to upset the politicians less?
So it's an opportunity because my father's case is a litmus test, right? They have a British citizen in Hong Kong that's in jail for peaceful campaigning and journalism. We as a country want him back, and it's the easiest thing they could do. I mean, it would take less than 3 hours to put them on a plane and send them back home to the UK. So if they're not even willing to do something like this in such a clear-cut case, where he might very well die in jail, then what else can we expect from them? I mean, how can we expect a even or even fair relationship with a country that's not even willing to release one of our citizens from very blatant persecution?
And so your message to the Prime Minister today is what exactly?
So we have an outstanding meeting to meet with him. I would it'd be very important for me to meet him personally, not just for me and for the family, but also for the Hong Kong government, to show that this is a case that's taken with the utmost priority, to show that they can't keep mistreating my father the way they've been doing. Because the reason why he's in these conditions is because they believe that they could get away with denying him natural light, denying him the Eucharist for 4 years, and putting him in this little concrete block by himself. So it is that. It's showing that my father and the values he stood for has the British government's full faith behind him.
Sebastian Lai, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good luck. Still to come here on The Breakfast Show this morning, we'll discuss what happens to Ukraine if they won't do a deal with Russia and America pulls its support. That's coming up next. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Well, coming up, we'll be debating NATO's next move as it looks to protect Ukraine's future security. But first, a reminder of all the day's top stories.
Oh, thank you, Wilfred. The Prime Minister is expected to update MPs this afternoon on talks with European leaders to defend Ukraine against Russia and secure lasting peace. Responding to calls from US Republicans for him to resign, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy told Sky News that he would only go if Ukraine was allowed to join NATO.
They'll have to negotiate with me, and I said that I'm exchanging it for NATO membership.
Armed Forces Minister Luke Pollard told this programme that he believed that Ukraine's rightful place was in the NATO alliance, but he said the call from Britain's ambassador to Washington, that's Peter Mandelson, for Ukraine to declare a ceasefire first before Russia was not government policy. And one person has died and 4 others injured in a stabbing attack in the Israeli city of Haifa. Authorities say the attacker has been killed. Anora has won big at this year's Oscars, scooping 5 Academy Awards in total. It's all about a sex worker who has a chance of a Cinderella story when she marries a Russian oligarch. Meanwhile, Adrian Brody was named Best Actor for his role in The Brutalist.
Right, let's get more now on our lead story. Ukraine's president is back home after yesterday's summit with European leaders in London and his meeting with the King. Our defence and security editor, Deborah Haynes, has more from Kiev.
Well, nothing's really changed, has it? Let's face it, we haven't heard from Donald Trump since about specifically all of this European fanfare to do with security supporting Ukraine, peace plans. Nothing really works unless Donald Trump says yes. If Donald Trump does not back what Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron are proposing, then the European peace plan looks pretty feeble, given that the European militaries rely so heavily on America's far more powerful armed forces. It is just a reality of the fact that Europe chose to disinvest in its military capabilities since the end of the Cold War and has always been, let's face it, heavily reliant on American support. Just look back in history to World War II. Unfortunately, if the Allies remain divided, then the proposal that they can give to Ukraine doesn't look very good. However, of course, there are positives in that you are finally seeing the Europeans in this unified, urgent stance, a stance that, frankly, they should have adopted from the 24th of February 2022. Instead, since that moment, yes, there has been, of course, a lot of military support to Ukraine, but no serious focus on their own armed forces, no real focus. Look at the UK not trying to spend the money required to refill stockpiles that had been depleted with support to Ukraine. So now, when you have the Prime Minister standing on the world stage saying that he is going to contribute troops and jets to this coalition of the willing, people inside the military are asking, what troops, what jets? Haven't you had a look at the actual capacity for the UK to sustain a serious operation? Yes, this is a peacekeeping mission of sorts. It would be a reassurance force on the ground if it were to happen. But the reassurance force needs to be reassuring enough to stop Vladimir Putin from trying to test them. And Russia has been in a war footing since at least since the full-scale invasion. Its economy is churning out weapons at a rate that the Europeans cannot match at the moment. So with all this language and given the severity of the situation, the Prime Minister and other leaders across Europe say they're going to get serious. They now need to show that they are with some action.
Deborah Haynes there for us. Well, after his bust-up with President Zelenskyy in the White House on Friday, Donald Trump said you either make a deal or we're out. So what happens if there is no deal and the White House carries through on that threat? Let's discuss that now with Mark Leahy. He's a former special advisor to the NATO Secretary-General. He's here with me in studio. And we're also joined by Hannah Hopko in Kiev, the co-founder of the International Centre for Ukrainian Victory. A very good morning to you both. Hannah, I'll come to you first of all. What was your reaction to that meeting in the White House last Thursday?
So, of course, I expected from United States a true leadership, even knowing and hearing before statements from Trump and his team. But still, a deal without security guarantees, it sounds like an appeasement of the aggressor. Deal without security guarantees is a trap, because for 11 years of Russian aggression, when Russia acted alone, when invaded in Ukraine in 2014, and now axis of evil states are supplying Russia with machinery, with drones, with ballistic missiles, even with soldiers like North Korea. And now we have to talk about deal without justice, deal without making Russia pay punishment. So, of course, I was disappointed.
Mark, what was your take on that meeting? But I guess more importantly, this point about whether or not, as much as the Europeans step up to the plate, which we've got, I guess, a hint of over the last 24 hours, whether or not some kind of peacekeeping force in Ukraine is possible without US backing.
I think in general terms, you could have a peacekeeping force without American troops on the ground. But I think in practical terms, what you do need is the backstop, which Keir Starmer has talked about. And that can be intelligence support, it can be air cover, it can just be the general sense, because the Russians don't take Europe as seriously as they take America. So if they know America is the backstop, that deters them. Deborah talked about a reassurance force. That's a euphemism. You need a deterrence force. The peacekeeping deal is not about peacekeeping, it's about actually having a ceasefire that's enforced. So I think in practical terms, you can't do it without the Americans, even if they're not on the ground.
What do you make, Mark, of the last 24, 48 hours in London and all the meetings Keir Starmer's been hosting?
Well, I think what you're seeing is the logical response. They're doing their best to mend the fences from what was a shocking and catastrophic event in the White House. They're trying to demonstrate that the Europeans will do the heavy lifting. And when you're seeing with Keir Starmer, is he's made it quite clear whose side he's on, but he's done it in a way that tries to avoid offending President Trump. So I think what you're seeing is actually the best you could do in the circumstances. Whether it will get there is another matter.
Hannah, have you been encouraged by the scenes coming out of London in the last day or two?
So we need more actions, and I wanted to hear that confiscation of Russian sovereign assets, we are talking about 300 billion of US dollars. This is not just about talking, it's will be implemented, because we need money. We need money to produce more weapons, to defend Ukraine and defend Europe. So it's a time for Europe to lead, not just only looking at the White House and depend on the decisions there. Because if tomorrow United States will say, okay, we are leaving to defend our interests in Indo-Pacific region, which is more important for us, then what Europeans will be doing? Europe consider Ukraine as a shield, but we cannot be a shield forever. We are a security contributor. We are, let's be frank, even a security guarantor, because Ukrainian armed forces, which is de facto European armed forces, we are defending the eastern flank of NATO countries. So this is why we have to prepare a plan B in case if America is leaving Europe. And this plan B should be with all acknowledgement that we need to pay more, we need to produce more weapons, and actually to take responsibility for our continent, with US or without. But the problem is here that on the one hand, Europe needs Ukraine as a shield. On the other, Europe depends on the United States. And we need to buy more time to build capacity. As United States, they don't have capacity to cover two main theaters in Europe and Indo-Pacific. So Europe wasted 3 years of full-scale war not preparing for these scenarios. And my question to European leaders, are you ready for the worst-case scenario? It seems like not.
I guess that's one of the things that's been discussed over the last couple of days. I just want to bring some headlines crossing from the Kremlin that are some of these lines coming in saying it's important that someone forces Zelenskyy to change his position and seek peace. He's refusing to settle peace through negotiations. And the fact that Zelenskyy said he's not willing to cede territory to Russia shows an unwillingness to accept the reality on the ground. They're talking about the developments of the last couple of days. One line also says the fragmentation of the West has begun. Russia is continuing its dialogue with the United States on normalising bilateral ties. I guess, Mark, some of these comments we would expect to come from the Kremlin, but I guess it's been despite the gatherings yesterday between European leaders here and Canada, it's been a great week for them.
Oh, yes. I mean, let's be clear. What has happened with the United States is a reframing of the Western alliance and not in our favour, and the Russians are cock-a-hoop over it. And it's not just what happened in the White House on Friday, it's all the things that are gone before. You're seeing people like the Director of National Intelligence in the US, Tulsi Gabbard, basically acting as they call her Russia's girlfriend. America has changed. Whether that change is permanent, how profound it is, we're not sure. But all of these developments will please the Russians and are really a huge threat to Western defence. And I think Europe now knows this. But obviously, you've got to make up time. And the crisis is now, our stockpiles are low. We need to be pushing defence spending fast. So we've got a long-term problem, but we also need some very, very big short-term fixes.
Clearly, Mark, I mean, it's not like Russia's stockpiles are full either at this point in time. Do we have time to adapt to the new world order if it is indeed going to be one of Europe standing on its own without US backing? How long does that take for Europe to be in a position where it can operate on its own?
It's a process, not an event. We need to act in an emergency way, but then also introduce long-term answers. You can't turn your defence industrial base around in a day, but you can start spending money now. You can take more risks now. You can be stronger now. So what you've got to do is act in an emergency way now within the context of a long-term policy. And this is actually going to involve a lot of money. You know, what Keir Starmer has announced as 2.5% is not nearly enough. And we took that money from the US aid budget, from the UK aid budget. Actually, we're going to have to take money from more taxes or other budgets because there simply isn't enough money being put. At the moment, we talk about challenge and pain. We've not actually suffered that much pain in terms of the defence budget increasing, and there's going to be a lot more we have to do.
Hannah, just finally, what's the mood in Kiev after the last week or so?
The fighting spirit is even higher. We understand what is at stake, and we understand the whole pressure on Ukraine for concessions. Unfortunately, we are not seeing pressure on Russia when Russian economy is weak. It's a time for Russian defeat, not for dances with the Russian bear, because this is very dangerous for all of us. And Ukrainians are donating even more for Ukrainian armed forces, and we understand that we don't buy this ceasefire idea or peaceful settlement, because as a former chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, 2014-2019, I remember all this Minsk I, Minsk II political diplomatic way. So we ended up with the full-scale war, Russia with genocidal character. So we Ukrainians are suffering for centuries with Russian imperialism. So for us, it's important to explain Europe, either Europe help Ukraine to defeat Russia when Russian economy is really weak and there are problems inside Russia, even if Putin tries to show that they are also strong and stable. No, this is not true. So Ukraine, we pay the price. Bucha, Mariupol, justice, this is about our values. We do not trade with values, and we, of course, hope that our European partners will finally confiscate assets, blockade Russian trade in Baltic Sea, actually invest more in our capacity. Because what if tomorrow America will tell Europe, pay 5 or 10 times bigger and without any guarantees providing security? So you should learn the lessons, what's happening now in Ukraine, be smart and think about your future. With US, of course, we want to have this support and win, but we have to prepare for plan B, for plan C, and worst case scenario.
Hannah and Mark, thank you both very much for joining us. Much appreciated. So to come here on The Breakfast Show, we'll get the very latest from the Vanity Fair's Oscars after party red carpet. Katie Spencer will be back with all the key takeaways from an extraordinary night in Los Angeles.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirm that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
Sky News get the full story first. Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
I just took a shower above the clouds. You know why? Because this is the Emirates A380. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Welcome back. The biggest night in films taking place in Los Angeles. Anora won 5 awards at what was the 97th Academy Awards. It included Best Film, Best Director, Best Actress. Well, let's bring in our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer, who joins us from LA. Katie, I mean, what an epic night. It must have been as it unfolded, the events and then the parties afterwards, but nothing can beat what this meant to the first man ever, I think, to win 4 Oscars in a single night.
4 Oscars. Anora won 5 Oscars in total because Mikey Madison ended up beating Demi Moore to win Best Actress. But Sean Baker, the filmmaker that's behind Anora, which is this story of a stripper who ends up falling in love with the son of a Russian oligarch. Now, he ended up going on stage 4 times, which was historic in itself because no one person has ever won for one film in one night, taking Best Director, the editor, the producer, and also he wrote the script. So look, he's an incredibly talented man. You saw me earlier in the hour. I was talking about the fact that this party is about to end within the next 10 minutes. Do you think I made it into the party within the last 20 minutes? I made it into the party. So I have to say, I went in there. Did I see any Oscars? Did I see any celebrities? I did see Oscars, but I didn't see any of the famous ones that we would know. And I didn't see any one of the famous people in there. I saw Richard Curtis, who I didn't even think we saw at the Oscars a bit earlier on. So it's one of those things where everyone comes on here to the Vanity Fair, has their picture taken, maybe has one glass of champagne, and then I think they go out the other side, which is a waste, isn't it? Come on, half of Sky News are there. We can make the most of that free bar.
Yeah, there must be an after party, and you know what? It's 1:50 there, and you've been working hard, so you definitely deserve a drink. I feel like it's nearly the end of our shift as well.
Oh, totally ready for the bubbles.
Yeah, we're going to join you in that over here, Katie.
So as soon as we're all off air, just know that we're cheersing you from afar.
Listen, let's talk about that after party then, Katie. So you're at the Vanity Fair after party. Who's been turning up? Who's been going into that party? And do you have a ticket to go in and party with the stars a bit later?
Well, this is the revealing thing. You don't really want to ask me about access and ticket and what have you, because technically speaking, no. But here we are, and it's the end of the evening, and most people have gone home. So why shouldn't we go in and have a glass of champagne? Yeah, look, basically your ticket to get you inside there, if you haven't been officially invited, is generally speaking a golden statuette. You have to have won an Oscar really to confidently walk inside there. And yeah, look, there's a few Oscars in there. There's lots of music. There's giant glitter balls. People are enjoying themselves. Should we spare a thought for those who have come tonight dressed in some of the designer dresses? It seems to have been a theme tonight. I know the Brutalist film is all about architecture and brutalist architecture, of course. Some of the dresses that we've seen tonight, Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo, Kim Kardashian as well, they've had these huge dresses. Now, it's okay if you're posing for the cameras and wanting to get in the papers the next day for these outrageously big skirts. We could almost rest a glass of champagne on in themselves. But actually, to go in and enjoy the party and have a sit down, I'm not sure how you'd function in one of those. It's not particularly practical, but they have looked absolutely stunning, really. And it's, yeah, impressive in terms of fashion, impressive in terms of wins. What's not impressive, I'd say, is Adrian Brody spitting out his chewing gum.
I mean, I think that, you know, what speaks of the design overall for the way that Nathan Crowley, production designer, and myself, it really defines what the world of Wicked is, where, you know, we were designing into the corners of, you know, of all of the spaces and creating an atmosphere that would, for an audience, would feel like it actually existed.
So, Katie, I've got a question for you. It's kind of splitting opinion here in the office. Adrian Brody throwing that chewing gum like you were talking about. Some people are saying he would be in the bin, dumped within a moment for doing something like that to their girlfriend. Other people are saying, needs must, you're in the moment. What do you make of it?
I mean, he has gifted us tonight the ultimate Oscars meme, hasn't he? Throwing your chewing gum at your girlfriend. I mean, I'm not sure I'd stand for it. There are plenty of other options. I mean, classic cinema etiquette from any sort of high street cinema. Just shove it under your seat. I'm not saying I've ever done it before, but there's other things you could do. A tissue, perhaps. You don't need to throw it at your girlfriend.
Yeah, just put it in your pocket. I mean, yeah, it's going to slightly ruin your suit, but on the flip side, I would say it's a very good catch.
Yeah,
gross,
for her,
but impressive.
She's committed to making sure that he feels comfortable on that stage, and she's there 100% backing him.
I know. She chased after him, caught it. It was quite a bizarre. Gross, slightly but impressive.
Tender.
Yeah, slightly tender as well, I agree. Katie, I just want to bring it back to the vibe overall, because 2-3 weeks ago, we would have been thinking, how are they going to have a celebratory night in light of the fires? On top of that, of course, the sad news of Gene Hackman as well. But it all did still come together because they managed to touch on those in a fitting way.
Yeah, absolutely. There was the typical in memorial section that you always have at these events, but actually before that there was a reference to Gene Hackman and just how much he has meant to this town and his legacy that he leaves behind. So yes, that absolutely wasn't overlooked. Look, it's been a really interesting year this year, particularly with Anora and those 5 wins. I think I've spoken to you guys personally since the start of this year. That's been a really tough one to call. If you cast your mind back to Oppenheimer last year, we knew from the very beginning that was an impressive piece of cinema making, and that looked destined to win. It's been so hard to predict what was going to win this Oscar season, and actually, look, Anora is a brilliant win. I would actually urge you, if you haven't seen Anora, it's a brilliant example of why indie filmmaking really does matter. It's not your Marvel superhero film. It's a funny, brilliant drama, definitely worth seeing and definitely deserving of those 5 Oscars that it got tonight.
Katie, you are deserving of your glass of champagne and then some, so see it away and enjoy the rest of your early morning there. We appreciate the coverage, as always. Katie Spencer there.
Cheers.
Cheers to you. We'll be maybe potentially joining you in just a couple of minutes. But first, we're going to have the weather.
The perfect climate, wherever the destination. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The next few days will be largely dry and settled, though spells of wet and windy weather will try to move in from the northwest. Overnight, cloud and rain did move south across Scotland into northern England and Northern Ireland, followed by clear spells and blustery showers for the far north of Scotland. Further south, it's been a cold start with widespread frost and fog patches. It should, though, remain largely dry today.
The perfect climate, whatever the forecast. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
That does it for the 3 of us today. Thanks so much for watching. Up next, it's Sky News Today. All of the day's top stories in just a few moments.